Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. We were shown a man and told that he was the strongest shadow of the family, named Sal Cooper. His codename is Shadow, and they are the ones who do all the dirty work, such as murders, arson, espionage. Watching Sal, the warrior among the many knights said that he was a shadow, betrayed the family and conspired with the enemy for his own personal gain. In the name of the new head of the Cooper family, he ordered his immediate execution. The protagonist was pierced by many spear blows. The stranger with a smirk on his face revealed that on the day MC became a shadow, he had placed a curse on him. The guy stretched out his hand to the many corpses and said that all his strength would be transferred to him, and all the harm he would suffer, he would make them all suffer. Sal rushed into battle while the plot told us that in the end, the man who swore not to reconcile himself to his own fate died along with his oppressors, but died justly. Blood was dripping from his mouth. The staff was enveloped in energy, after which we were told that fortunately, there was an unexpected rebirth. He returned from hell with hatred. A smirk appeared on the child's face, and the plot told us that even though he was a 3-year-old boy, this did not prevent him from swearing. Frowning, the boy emphasized the fact that in this life, he would not allow himself to make the same mistake. Brandishing his blade, Sal killed the servants. He was standing in front of an enraged demon beast. Shrouded in an aura, the protagonist noted that from now on, Alan was now his shadow. The man slapped him, and we were told that he had changed his attitude towards his past life because he was the illegitimate son of a family that everyone hated. There were many corpses behind MC. The boy said with a mad look that he was repaying him the debt. Examining the blade, MC noted that it was time for his revenge. The guy was on his knees. Looking at the man, he listened that being a shadow of the clan, he had betrayed his family and collaborated with their enemies for his own desires. In the name of the new head of Clan Cooper, he was sentencing him to immediate execution. The protagonist was furious. With glowing eyes, he rushed into battle. The blade stopped in front of the man's throat. A blade pierced the boy's chest. A lot of attacks began to be launched on him. MC imagined the image of a dragon. He imagined attacking his opponent and remarking that if the afterlife really existed, then he would send them there in parts. Sal lay unconscious. He suddenly woke up. The boy rose to his feet with a wary look. Frowning, he thought that this place looked familiar. The woman approached him and ordered him to wash his face as soon as possible, because he would soon be taken away. Drops of sweat dripped down the protagonist's face. She hit him and asked him what kind of look he had. Lying on the floor, the boy asked. His gaze fell on his reflection in a puddle of water. MC began to smile. Looking at his hands, he assumed that he had suffered when he was 3 years old. Clenching his hand into a fist, Sal declared that he had indeed been reborn. He imagined himself in a past life and revealed that he was a shadow of the Cooper family. Along with other shadows, he had been groomed for this role since childhood, subjected to the most brutal training, receiving all the dark deeds, and in return being given all kinds of wealth and fame. The warriors stood in front of the head while the protagonist said that therefore they were satisfied with this. He remembered how he had killed a person and noted that as a bastard, he was determined to change his fate so as not to become the scum in his own family. He trained as hard as he could to compensate for the lack of natural talent. Kneeling before the count, MC noticed that even when his family didn't appreciate him, he himself asked to be sent to war with other clans. Walking away from the many corpses, he added that following orders, he chopped off the heads of his enemies and massacred entire cities. Thrusting his sword into the ground, the young man emphasized that finally, after countless battles, he had won the war for the family. Closing one eye, Sal said that he thought that they would greet him as a hero, with all kinds of honors, but all this was only a betrayal. He remembered standing among the soldiers and listening to the fact that he was sentenced to immediate execution. Smiling, the stranger stated that on the day they became shadows, he had cast a shadow oath spell on them. The protagonist frowned at the words that his ever-growing power was being transferred to him as well, and that all of his wounds would be transferred to them, the shadows. The guy was shocked by the words that wealth and fame are just fables to fool them. MC rushed into battle. He wounded the magus in the shoulder, and noted that in the end, being furious at these words, he swung his sword for the last time. A powerful aura emanated from Alan. The energy struck Sal's body. Blood began to flow from his mouth as he thought that although he had understood how blood magic worked, he had been able to use the reverse oath of shadows, regaining all the power that Alan had taken from him. But he could not escape death. The boy came to the conclusion with a serious look that he would not make the same mistakes in this life. His stomach began to rumble, and he noticed that he was as hungry as if he hadn't eaten anything for the past 3 days. A mouse crawled out of the hay. Smiling, the protagonist thought that he would first eat this mouse to satisfy his hunger. In his past life they were considered a real delicacy on the battlefield, much better than human flesh. Someone pulled back the curtain. The boys came into his room and called out to him. As they marched on him, the warriors declared that Master Alan wanted to see him, so he would go with them. MC began to be led away while he reasoned that in his previous life, it was at this age that he was chosen as a shadow. However, the memories of the ceremony have completely disappeared. He believes that it was then that Alan poisoned him with his blood magic. A smile appeared on his face. He bit one of the guys. The dumbfounded warrior shouted that the boy clung to him like a dog. Swinging his fist, the stranger asked how Sal dared to do this. The boy dodged the attack. He drew the blade from the warrior's sheath. Swinging his sword, the protagonist chopped off the hand of his offender. The frightened guy wondered if the boy knew how to handle a sword. MC smirked at the blade and thought that he finally had a chance for revenge. He imagined someone controlling a person with red mana and told him that the Shadow Oath is an ancient spell of blood magic, which allows the user to make the target of the spell their shadow. At the cost of just a couple of drops of blood, the shadow cannot harm its master, on the contrary, only taking damage instead of him, while at the same time the Shadow Master will take all that power and abilities, which his shadow accumulates. The boy imagined the book and added that due to the excessive cruelty of this spell, the Empire issued a law more than 100 years ago, which stated that all books containing the Shadow Oath spells must be destroyed, as well as the use of this spell must be prohibited. Alan slapped the warrior in the face and cried out that he was useless trash. He pointed his finger at the guy and asked loudly how he dared to be called part of the Cooper family if even a wild dog could beat him. Walking towards the protagonist, he wondered how he even dared to oppose his master's people. Sal stared at him. With a mad look, he ordered to throw him into prison to rot. The woman took a step forward and asked Alan to wait. With a slight smile on her face, she said that this child has been a street kid since childhood, so this behavior is normal for him. But now is not the time for punishment, because the initiation ceremony is much more important. After which the plot introduced us to Hera Cooper, the head of the Cooper family and Alan's mother. Standing in front of her son, she asked him not to forget what she had told him. Grinning, Gara told him not to forget what they were going to do today. Looking at the boy, Alan thought that he did not even know why his mother had chosen such a pathetic bastard as his shadow. He would have to kill him as soon as possible. Smiling, the guy accepted his mother's request. Closing her eyes, the woman noticed that then she would now take the others out and leave them alone. Leaving there, Hera ordered to vacate the room and leave Master Alan alone. Let the others cast a spell to hide the sound, so that no one would interfere with the young master. The guy poured the liquid into a glass. Frowning, he revealed that from now on, they were the soldiers of their shadow army. Now they had to swear to their family. The guys stood in front of him and said that they swear in the name of the shadow, that their lives will be devoted only to the good of the family. Everything that they have and will have belongs to their family from now on. Sal stared at the liquid. He began to drink it. The glass fell to the floor. The guys lost consciousness. Alan stood in front of them with a wicked grin, saying that this bunch of fools couldn't even tell the difference between poison and holy water. Blood dripped from his finger. He created a magic circle under the children and said that all their strength, all their abilities, would belong to him, and all the wounds that he would suffer they would take upon themselves. The circle was filled with dark energy. The guys were surrounded by an aura. Looking around his body, Alan noted in his mind that he felt the power fill him. The Shadow Oath worked. He didn't even think it would be so easy. He needed to tell his mother the good news. Turning around, he called out to his mother. His legs suddenly began to hurt. Falling to the floor, the guy wondered why his legs did not listen to him. With a dumbfounded look, he wondered if this was a side effect of the Shadow Oath. He began to cry and call for Hera. Standing behind, Sal declared that he was really only a pathetic coward capable only of hiding behind his mother's skirt. Turning around, Alan listened that the protagonist was sorry that his mother had cast a soundproof spell on the place so as not to disturb him, so that no matter how loudly he screamed, no one would hear him. His gaze was insane. Lying in front of him, the guy clarified how MC woke up and how he knew about the oath. Holding the sword in front of him, the protagonist asked how the guy would react if he told him that he was able to undo the oath. Mana enveloped his sword. He plunged his blade into the ground. Stunned, Alan clutched his chest and wondered why his heart seemed to be breaking. Going to him, Sal clarified what he was doing. Remembering how he was betrayed in a past life, the protagonist thought that in his past life, he had to die to return everything that Alan stole from him, but this time, smirking, he noted that it was just an eye for an eye. Hera left the estate and suddenly heard a scream. Turning around, the woman listened to the fact that the spell had been broken. The moon illuminated the castle. The man stood in front of the bed and said that the young master was fine. He was only slightly exhausted after using such strong magic. As for canceling the soundproofing spell, one of the servants was distracted during the spell. He had already finished him off. Turning around, Hera ordered to feed his body to the dogs. After bowing, the butler said that, however, the young master looked a little excited. Although that was understandable, he was still too young for such a thing. It had invariably led to a great psychological stress. Looking down, Alan thought that for some reason it seemed to him that something had happened, but he could not remember what it was. The woman touched his forehead. With a smile on her face, she emphasized the fact that he shouldn't worry about shadows. It's just the law of the jungle. The guy pushed her hand away. He said with a mad look that he was the future head of the Cooper family. These non-entities should give their lives for him. Looking at his mother, he clarified whether this was true. Gara hugged him with the words that he was really her son. If he wanted something, he could just tell his mother. Standing in front of the room, Sal noted that they were a cute couple. Looking at the orb in his hand, he said that from now on, Alan Cooper was his shadow. As he walked down the hallway, The boy noticed that in his previous life, when he had fought for his family, he had found a whole tome of blood magic, which contained another oath of shadows. He handed the documents to the master and told him that he was happy to present the tome to the head of the family, but even then he was under her influence. It was good that he had studied the contents of the book before that and was able to combine the knowledge gained with the experience of returning power from his previous life. In his hands was a white piece of cloth. Smiling, Sal stressed that now only one drop of blood would be enough to cancel the oath. His relationship with Alan would change a lot, but despite all this, he was still 3 years old and too weak to fight them, so now it was time for him to get stronger. His eyes began to glow. He imagined a mountain of flames and reported that it was a real training ground created by the Cooper family to test shadows and find strong enough candidates for the role, just like Prometheus, who stole fire for people. The protagonist imagined how the guy was tied to a tree and noted that Prometheus was ready to accept his fate and suffer from the claws of the eagle every day. The Cooper family threw very young children on the fiery mountain. The children ran away from the mountain while MC reasoned that they were thrown there to walk this thorny path. As long as the eagles tore their flesh, even if he died, he had no right to give up. The monster appeared before the child, and Sal said that only when the first shadow reached the top of the mountain would she receive the blessing of the eagle griffin, receive a body that could not be harmed, no matter how tormented and beaten it was. The archer stood in front of the crowd and said that they were given only 3 days, they had only one goal, the methods they used did not matter. Frowning, the man said that they only needed to get to the top of the mountain alive, after which we were introduced to Enos, the shadow trainer. Standing among the other children, MC listened with a calm look that they should also not forget that all those who surrendered would be executed in 3 days. He held the whistle and shouted for them to start. The guys began to scatter. Enos was suddenly taken aback. Watching Sal, he reported that this boy was so confident and sluggish. Watching him, Enos listened to the fact that it was Sal, the bastard who had infuriated the young master the day before. The protagonist began to climb the rock. The guys began to laugh and shout that he decided to climb the mountain with his bare hands. He would definitely crash before even reaching the halfway point. The guy with a smile on his face clarified why they didn't go to him right now to pick up the body right away. Turning around, Enos said with a satisfied look that he had a better idea. Now was the time when he should appear. The griffin flew in the sky. The dumbfounded children raised their heads. Frowning, MC continued to climb the mountain. The griffin devoured corpses. His eyes shone brightly. Taking the bough from behind his back, the guy wondered why he didn't use the help of the griffin to get rid of him, since MC had angered Master Alan yesterday. Enos was preparing to fire a shot, and noted that the young master would be happy. The arrow flew past the monster. Looking at the boy, he asked who dared to do this. The griffin attacked him, shouting that he wished him dead. Sal dodged the attack. He jumped on the monster and thought that he had already been through it once. Holding the sword in his hand, the protagonist noted that he knows for sure that there is only one way to receive the blessing of the griffin as soon as possible. As he prepared to attack, he came to the conclusion that the monster needed to be tamed. The boy pierced the griffin's head. Jumping away from it, he thought that the griffin was a stubborn monster with human-like intelligence. If he couldn't defeat it completely, he wouldn't be able to tame it. He rushed into battle and came to the conclusion that this meant that he had to give his best. He swung his blade. The monster began to form a cloud of energy in its mouth. The current of wind threw the protagonist aside. He fell to the ground. Sal grabbed the edge of the ledge. Climbing back, he thought that he was too reckless. He was 3 now, not 30. Even his sword skills from his previous life would not help now. Watching the monster, the boy added that with his current height and weight, the griffin would smack him before he could even get close to it. MC glanced at the entrance to the cave and added that he had another way to overcome it. He just had to get to the cave. The monster was preparing to make another attack. Dodging the flow of mana, the protagonist thought that this was powerful wind magic. Running further, he reasoned that every time a griffin released currents of wind from its mouth, it increased its strength by 1, up to 10. Once it happened, even if there were 100 of it, it wouldn't be enough. Sal was suddenly surprised. He turned around. The main character jumped on the griffin. Holding the blade out in front of him, he thought that if he couldn't hide from her attacks, he could use her attack to get to the cave. The boy flew away. Smiling, he thought that in order to minimize the damage he had taken, he would immediately use the power of the Shadow Oath to take the power away from Alan. A cup of coffee fell to the floor. The guy was lying on the floor unconscious. The main character landed in a cave. Running further, he noted that he needed to hurry. The griffin followed him. With an enraged look, she asked where the little fool was running away. The monster stopped suddenly. She frowned. The protagonist held the blade in front of the monster cub. Standing in front of the griffin, MC asked not to worry, because he did not want to harm him. He emphasized the fact that he could help and heal his wings so that he could fly. Squinting, the boy said that he had one condition. The guys moved up the mountain and discussed that Sal had already been eaten. They needed to report it to the master, because they would definitely be rewarded. The griffin landed in front of them. Crossing his arms, the protagonist said that he would have to upset them and send them straight to hell. The monster began to swing its paws. She devoured guys. Glancing at the boy, she noted that she had fulfilled her part of the agreement. Now it was his turn, after which MC asked to be taken to the dungeon at the northernmost part of this mountain range. They arrived at the gate. The boy listened with a satisfied look that, as they had agreed, he would receive Perseus' sword, and then get the blood of the jellyfish for her, which would heal any wounds. Smiling, Sal wondered that he was sorry that his target was not the sword, and certainly not to help the griffin. The monster opened the gate. Looking into the dungeon, he added that he wanted to use this griffin to destroy the dungeon. The jellyfish opened its mouth wide as it watched them. The boy was walking in her direction. The main character remembered how he ran through the gate, and said that in a previous life, when Alan was 12, his mother sent a whole army of shadows to get Perseus' sword, but in this dungeon there was a statue of a jellyfish, capable of turning all living things into stone. The guys ran into battle while the main character said that many shadows fell in this fight in order to protect Alan from her. Kneeling, the young man found the sword as he reasoned that he was the only one left alive. However, Perseus' sword could only belong to S-level geniuses, which meant that he couldn't pick it up. He imagined Alan fighting and stated that the young master was just a very gifted young man. He had no problem taking the sword and killing the jellyfish. The guy raised the blade above his head, and Sal reported that as a result, Alan became the chosen sword, for which he was rewarded with countless resources, good connections, and many loyal servants. Smirking, the boy pointed out that this meant that in this life, even if he couldn't get hold of this weapon, he couldn't let him get to the sword. Entering the room, the monster asked where the sword was, where the blood of the jellyfish was, and why there was only one pile of stones. The doors closed behind them. Tilting his head, the griffin asked if this was a trick of the protagonist. The frightened boy pointed his finger to the side and said that there were monsters behind her. The statues rushed into battle. The enraged bird wondered when these stupid stones came to life. She unleashed a powerful attack and overwhelmed the creatures. A purple glow emanated from the stones. The statues began to merge into one. Falling to the ground, Sal reported that they were merciless, cruel, terrifying, that the three statues had no facial features, and that they shared one eye and one tooth, like the three mythical sisters of Gria. Going towards them, the griffin listened that they, like the jellyfish, were the daughters of the god of the sea, and therefore were able to control the water. A water spirit appeared in front of them. Running away from the stream of water, the protagonist cried out that he was already looking for a sword. The enraged monster screamed that if this continued, the ceiling would collapse, and they would die there. A frightened MC turned around and replied that there were some runes on the wall, they would suggest a solution. With a satisfied look, he thought that this was just wonderful. At such a rate the dungeon would collapse, burying everything there under a pile of stones. Running to the portal, the boy emphasized that he would go through a secret passage that he had discovered in his past life. Stopping, he added that there was not enough power. Sal pointed his finger at the ceiling and said that the runes said to get rid of the eye above. The monster looked at her eye. She began to flap her wings. The griffin tore her eye from the ceiling. The protagonist watched the flow of water that was approaching him. The monster suddenly clutched his head. Upon landing, the bird said that they had indeed turned into water. Approaching her, Sal told her that according to the runes, Perseus learned about the location of the jellyfish just after he stole the eye of the Greya sisters, so that their eyes were weak. The monster looked at him and wondered where the sword was and where the blood was, what could heal her child. Pointing his finger to the side, the boy replied that the sword was there. Turning around, the griffin drew attention to the red blade. The main character imagined how the knight holds the head of a Medusa and said that when Perseus cut off the head of a Medusa with this sword, red and green blood flowed from it. Red can poison any living creature, and green can heal any wound. But this is just a legend. This dungeon is fraught with another secret. Lowering his gaze, the boy emphasized that when the sword of Perseus appeared in the dungeon, the jellyfish would also be resurrected. The monster's eyes began to glow. Medusa pounced on the griffin. A powerful blow rang out. Running away from there, Sal thought that this was great, and it was time for him to leave. Moving towards the portal, he added that the awakened statue of Medusa could not be stopped in any other way than to cut off its head with Perseus' sword. The boy turned. He managed to jump away from the jellyfish's attack. His face was serious. Looking at the monster, MC wondered what had happened. Looking at the stone, he clarified where the griffin was. A small monster crawled out from under a rock and screamed that this thing looks even scarier than the previous ones. Then the protagonist will fight himself, because she does not want to die. Running away from the gunshots, Sal thought that it was a good thing that he had already gone through this dungeon in a past life, so he knew what to do. Paying attention to the warriors, he noticed that first he had to get the shield of the Knights of the Round Table. Looking at the armor, he added that with the help of reflection, he would be able to avoid direct contact with the jellyfish's eyes, and moreover, covering himself with a shield, the protagonist stated that he was able to withstand the attack of her eyes. Frowning, he noted that the shot was strong. Blood began to flow from his mouth. Putting his hand on his chest, the boy came to the conclusion that one shield was not enough. Looking at the monster's back, he added that she had destroyed the dungeon exit. He began to run towards the sword. Stretching out his hand, MC wondered how he could know for sure. If he hadn't even tried to take the blade, he had to do it, otherwise he would die there. Approaching the sword, he stressed that even if he had to put his life on the line, Sal raised his weapon above his head. A snake pierced through his chest. The blade sank to the ground. Medusa stared at the protagonist, who asked how he was able to pick up the sword, since he was not gifted from birth. In his memories, a picture appeared of Alan standing over him, and wondering how he dared to even think about touching this sword with his D level. Standing in front of the crucified boy, Hera said that Sal would not know for sure that they had taken away his natural talent, because the magic of amnesia would help them solve this problem. Looking down, MC noted that he now understood what was going on. He remembered how the guy with a smirk on his face had said that it was a pity, now his swordsmanship talent was his. Red energy surrounded the protagonist. Hiding, the griffin asked what had happened. She was suddenly taken aback. The wound on the boy's chest healed. His face was serious. Sal chopped off the jellyfish's head with one stroke. The boy poured a potion near the monster's corpse, thinking about how in his previous life, his swordsmanship level was S. Sal closed the test tube, continuing to think that Alan's mother used some kind of magic to kidnap him and hand him over to her son, after which she erased his memories. That's the truth. The hero clutched his head, laughing. The griffin did not understand what was wrong with this guy. Sal held his face, talking about how things were getting more and more interesting, wishing that Alan and the whole family would just wait for him. The monster closed his eyes, thinking that it didn't matter while the boy was going crazy. It was better to get out of here as soon as possible. The bird turned its back when the hero called it to him. The griffin walked over with folded hands, clarified what his excellency needed, thinking about the fact that he was a level 5 monster, and why he was afraid of him at all. The boy wondered if he had a strong head. The monster looked inquiringly, asking again. He flew up sharply, breaking through the rock, scattering. The monster with bumps on his head dragged the hero on his back, reasoning that this asshole had been using him to destroy the dungeon from the beginning, but since he had agreed to heal his cub, he would forgive him. The silhouette of an unknown person was visible on the stones. The demon used the energy by looking at the image of the girl. He opened his eyes, blazing with magic. The monster stood on the rock, looking at the boy, said that he was blessing him. There was energy around Sal when he announced that he would grant him an indestructible body, and no matter how many times he was hit, he would remain unharmed. The boy looked at his hands, thinking that he felt much more enduring, and that small wounds healed on their own, and it was a good thing that he would minimize the amount of damage that would be passed on to Alan so that his mother would not soon suspect everything. Sal looked away, reasoning that he also had to hide the fact that he had an S-level talent and didn't draw too much attention. The protagonist handed the monster a jar, telling him to give it to his cub to drink, and his wings would be healed. The griffin poured a potion on the little monster. The boy watched as the small bird blazed with energy. He flew up, chirping. The monster exclaimed that the baby was finally able to fly. Sal looked up, saying that he had only learned to fly, and if he didn't find a master before he came of age, he would remain just a stupid bird. The monster wondered what he meant. The boy threw up his hands, noting that there was nothing wrong, he just wanted to warn him, and in the end, the griffin only became so strong after finding its master, wasn't it? The bird remembered the man, thinking that it was true. If the owner had not fed it people, then it would not have been able to develop its soul and become stronger. But the owner died more than 100 years ago. The question arose, where to find such a strong person who could easily kill others without batting an eyelid? She opened her eyes wide, understanding. The shadow of the monster fell on the young man when she said his name. The griffin bowed her head, asking to accept her cub as her magical pet, thinking that at such a young age, he was much stronger and smarter than the rest of his peers. Maybe in the future he would be able to surpass even Brad. The boy smiled, thinking that the monster had been caught. The hero turned around, agreeing to the offer, noting that they would only make a deal. He wanted to know everything about Brad Cooper. Sal frowned as he imagined the key, adding that it was also where their precious key was that opened the door to Brad's Zampicuto. The moon illuminated the castle. The question of what it meant was heard. They could not understand why. Hera held a mug of tea in her hand, interested in the fact that Alan passed out twice out of the blue, and it could not have happened just like that, and how long it could last. The man bowed his head, saying that she should not worry, because thanks to the Oath of Shadows, the young master quickly recovers. After all, instead of him, any damage is taken by the small shadows. The woman agreed. She stared into her reflection, thinking that something strange was just happening. It seemed that Alan had become like this just after the shadow ceremony. Someone was clearly behind it. The old man looked at the mistress, addressing her, noticed that something unexpected had happened. It required her attention. Sal Cooper took first place during the test exam, as they expected, however. Hera choked on her tea when she heard that the hero had used a griffin to kill Walker's uncle and his nephew, and then tamed his cub. She abruptly put the mug in the saucer, asking where he was. The man replied that he was right outside the door and would call him now. The young man took a step into the room. The boy put his hands behind his back, wondering what Madame wanted. The woman came closer, clarifying why he had killed the Walkers. The main character smiled mischievously, saying that he did it for the good of their family. It's somehow a pity that the shadow trainer died from a simple 3-year-old child, and their Cooper family does not need such garbage. Hera was shocked to hear the question that this was not so. The woman looked at him, not understanding whether it was anger or disgust. He frowned, she thinking that there was no fear. He definitely had some kind of trump card up his sleeve. Hera closed her eyes, asking Doug to give Sal a reward and send him to the healing springs of Eden. The young man closed his eyes, thanking the woman. He understood that the sources of Eden were lucky. The door closed as the boy left. The lady frowned, asking the servant to speed up the pace of learning magic deprivation. They should take Sal's talent and give it to his son before the ceremony of inheriting Brad's sword. After the man bowed, she thought that if Alan's secret about his lack of innate talent for swordsmanship was revealed, then he might be disinherited. Hera looked away angrily, thinking that she would let the bastard go for the time being, and see how far his impudence could go. The sources of Eden were shown. The main character walked along the side, putting his hand to his chin. He remembered the griffin talking about how before his death, Master Brad had used a forbidden magic technique to seal his soul at the bottom of the Onyx Springs, and the point of this was to pass on all of his knowledge and swordsmanship experience accumulated during his lifetime to an heir with S-level talent, also that the Cooper family's status in the Empire would not falter even after his death. The boy held the key, remembering how the monster had said that when he was at the bottom, he would just have to follow the water current, which would lead him to an underwater cave, where he would find the key, and he would show the way to the master. The bird looked at him menacingly, explaining that something was happening in the Eden Springs. Because of the long separation from the master, she did not know that exactly. The only thing that the master possessed blood magic. It would be difficult to compete with her. The guy scratched his chin as he talked about blood magic. It seemed that it wouldn't be easy to get the hereditary sword before Alan did. The children in the pool looked around when they discussed that this was the same Sal Cooper who passed the qualifying exam and took first place in it. He was also able to tame a baby griffin. Lucian put his hands on his belt, telling the children what was so cool. He was just the son of a pathetic whore. Renaud pointed to the main character, congratulating him for the fact that it turns out that he not only looks like a skinny monkey, but also moves like her, was able to climb the slide first. The servant laughed, saying that he really was a monkey. Sal looked up, remembering the guys, reasoned about how in his previous life, these two were his subordinates, but in the end, it turned out that they were specially sent to him by Alan. They fabricated all the charges against him, after which they made up a traitor to the motherland, and since they can always rely on the support of Alan, they were quickly brought to power. Renaud swung his fist, asking why he wasn't answering, and wanted to see if his indestructible body would help him. The hooligan ran his fist into the guy's face. The young man grabbed his arm, deflecting the blow. Sal twisted his arm, saying to watch. The scoundrel screamed in pain. Lucian grabbed the knife in his hand, saying that he was truly seeking death. Blood spurted to the side. The servant trembled, realizing that he had stuck a knife in his body. The main character covered himself with Renaud, holding his head. The young man smiled, apologizing for accidentally hiding behind this guy like a shield. He kicked it in Lucian's direction. The villains flew into the water when the young man noticed that they were very lucky, because this water is able to heal any wounds, advising them to swim a little. The hero laughed maliciously, adding that in the end they would still be useful to him for joint practice, reasoning that in this life he would make it so that they would obey him unquestioningly. The boy was drowning. Walking to the bottom of the pool, the guy asked about the smell of black magic. He was unconscious as he was enveloped in dark energy, wondering how such evil and forbidden magic, on the level of blood magic, could appear in the springs that heal any wounds, and it seemed that it was the griffin who called it something strange. Sal stared into his reflections, chasing away in his head that it was better not to sink into this water, which meant that he had to find another way to get to the bottom of the spring without touching the water. A stranger from the side was dragging a girl by the hair, who was screaming for help. The young man opened his eyes wide, recognizing this voice. The young guy held her tightly by the hair, saying that she could not even serve tea normally, and thought she deserved a good beating. The girl asked to be released, because she did not want to do it. The hero wondered if it was Adelia. The scoundrel raised his hand, shouting that she also dared to contradict him. Before he could finish speaking, his face was divided into two equal halves. Sal sliced him in half with a single punch. The children looked back at the murdered villain, shouting that the man had been killed. They needed to inform the guards and run. The young man held out his hand to the girl, asking if she was okay. The main character smiled, stretching out his hand, thought that she was a princess. He looked at the trembling girl, not knowing if he had frightened her. The guy scratched his head, apologizing for scaring her. She denied. The girl touched his chin, thanking him for saving her, introducing herself as Adelia and asking what his name was. The girl squeezed her hand tightly, increasing the level of health, drew attention to the guy that he was wounded again. The young man reasoned that Adelia was his best friend in a past life. She has an incredible magical talent, which is many times greater than the strength of her peers. The heroes stood back to back, when a friend asked not to worry about the hero, because she would help him. The young man recalled that they even once had a chance to fight together on the battlefield. Adelia blushed, trying to tell Sal that she was. The girl looked at the guy attentively, clarifying that his name was Mr. Cooper once again, thanking him for saving her. The main character's cheeks turned red when he realized that even at the age of 5, Adelia was incredibly cute. The young man, straightening his hair, chuckled that any gentleman would have done the same thing if he had asked to be called Sal. He lowered his head, asking her if she knew how she could empty this spring, or get to its bottom without touching the water, banishing the thought in his head that he should not forget about his mission, since he had found Adelia. Then everything would definitely work out. The girl looked at the hero cautiously, clarifying that he had noticed it too, hadn't she? The guy opened his eyes wide, not understanding what she was talking about. She stepped closer to him, quietly saying that there was some strange magic in this spring that healed any wounds, but once she touched it, nothing else could heal his body except this water. Sal frowned, reasoning that he understood everything. It seemed that this was another way for the Cooper family to control their shadows, which forced them to turn to them for treatment. Adelia grabbed the guy's hand, adding that she wanted to thank him for saving him, claiming that she knew one way to get to the bottom without touching the water. The girl spread her arms to her sides, flashing magic. Magic cloaks appeared on the heroes. The lady noted that she called it duck magic, explaining that thanks to it, people become like ducks. Even if they are at the bottom of the reservoir, their feathers will never get wet from the inside. The young man looked away, thinking that this was isolation magic, and it turned out that even as a child, Adelia had a habit of giving spells such strange names. The boys rushed in, exclaiming that they were there, and this guy killed a man. The young people noticed that they had come for them. Sal grabbed her arm, urging her on. The soldiers silently watched as the characters dived into the water. The guy and the girl were swimming down as he reasoned about how the undercurrent was leading right to the bottom of the spring. They must be there. Adelia vaguely stated that it was impossible to go there, and it was necessary to leave there as soon as possible. Sal screamed as their hands unhooked at the whirlpool. The girl sat next to the hero, telling him to wake up. The hero sighed, opening one eye. He looked around, thinking that it was here. The girl paid attention to the key in the guy's hands, wondering what it was. The guy explained that it was a precious key that could open the door leading to the spirit sword. They looked around, seeing a rocky cave. Adelia noticed that there was no door here, wondering how they could use this key. Assuming that maybe the door should be summoned, the hero asked again. The girl took the key in her hands, saying that although she didn't know what a spirit sword was, she would try. The lady flew up, enveloped in energy, turned to the key so that he could hear her call, find his master and open the door for them, which would lead to him. Under the magic girl, a symbol of magic was drawn. The hero looked away, realizing that this was bad. Huge flowers with teeth attacked the characters when the guy grabbed the girl, while running away. They were lying on the ground when a shadow fell on them. There was a portal in the huge mouth. The hero noted that it had appeared. The young man tried to wake up Adelia, who was passed out. He took her in his arms. Sal put her aside, knowing that there was nothing he could do about it. He would have to leave her here for a while. The guy touched her head, thinking that he had cast invisibility magic on her, which she had taught her in her previous life, so they would not be able to find her if they did get here. He quickly walked forward, realizing that in the end, an uphill battle awaited him. It was still a test to obtain Brad's own sword. The hero's leg appeared on the other side, where he was entering. Sal stared intently at what was happening in front of him. Two people could be seen on the mountain of corpses. The monster was holding the girl's body by the head. The creature looked to the side, greeting him. The creature threw the girl aside, the plot telling that the Eden Springs were not just a place to rest and heal wounds, but also a place where the Cooper family kept their concubines. But Sal only now found out what really happened to them. He opened his eyes wide, suggesting that they had all become sword food. The monster abruptly clung to the guy. The monster opened its mouth at the hero's head, noticing that he smelled of an Esther talent. The young man quickly walked back. He grabbed a large needle in his hand, not knowing how he knew. The entity raised its claw, wondering if he was Alan Cooper, that child gifted with S-level from birth, noting that he didn't look like a spoiled kid. The creature rushed to attack, assuming that the guy was a simple bastard who had encroached on the inheritance. The hero stopped the attack with his sword. The monster was smiling, saying that he would not give it to the young man just like that. He had to pass his tests first. The boy who was holding the onslaught replied that he should not worry, because he was here to kill him. The creature waved his hand, noting that nothing less was expected from its descendant. He looked at his opponent, noting that this was presumptuous. The hero came close to him. Rays of magic shot from side to side. The boy, gritting his teeth, fought off the attack. The monster threw his sword over his shoulder, telling the kid that he was still too weak. The creature opened all its eyes wide, not understanding what was happening. He noticed how the wound on the hero's chest was healing, asked about the gift of the griffin, surprised that this brainless bird recognized him. The wounded guy stared menacingly at his opponent. Hearing that he had not seen the griffin for a long time, the boy reasoned that Brad had sacrificed most of his power to seal his soul in his own sword, and he should get it, with his current power. Sal got to his feet, grabbed the weapon in his hands, thought that he still had a chance. A golden sword appeared in front of the creature. A magic arrow pierced through his palm as he asked about the blood magic prohibition technique. The monster's eyes popped out of its sockets as it screamed in pain. The boy stared at his opponent, claiming that he had been dead for a very long time and did not know that over the past 100 years, the Empire had invented several secret techniques to combat blood magic. He brandished his weapon, threatening that he would rip out his heart and get his inheritance. The creature was crucified on the cross, begging him not to do this. The hero brought the sword to his chest. The monster attacked the boy, shouting that it was not necessary, it was so scary. He pointed his finger at the hero, laughing at the top of his lungs, said that it was so funny, he had not played with such a small mouse for a long time. Blood flowed down the monster's claw. He lowered his head, stating that the game was over and he didn't want to have any more fun. Red demons appeared from the ground as he added that the boy had strength and talent. The spirits rushed to attack when the creature declared that there were not enough of them to claim the right to wield his sword. Sal sliced through the demons with his sword, wondering that an enemy could use blood to create spirits, knowing what kind of power he was talking about. The demon struck him from behind, causing damage. The boy brandished his sword, being alone against a very large number of spirits, reasoning that they attacked too often. He raised his sword upwards, activating the dome, shouted for the protection of the holy sword, mused that he was using Perseus' sword to protect himself from his magic. The monster touched the defense with his finger, noting that it was useless. The dome crumbled into small pieces from the touch. The creature grabbed the main character by the neck. The enemy lifted the hero off the ground, saying that he should know that after the cat has played with the mouse, it will eventually eat it, right? Sal gasped, realizing that the blood, the strength, was all gone. The monster smiled as he talked about how his aura was so warm and familiar, remembering that one of his concubines had the same one. Perhaps she was his mother. The hero abruptly opened his eyes, thinking about his mother. The creature opened its mouth wide, exclaiming that it was great, it would be able to taste the child. Shrapnel flew to the sides. The woman put her hand on her shoulder, telling the baby to fall asleep. They were lying in bed when my mother said that she was next to him and would stroke him all night. The boy ran with the flower to meet her, saying that it was hers. He stumbled and fell to the ground on his face. The woman stood with her back to the hero, apologizing, saying that her mother should leave. A stone flew into the guy's head with a scream that his mother did not want to. The guys, mocking, threw stones at him, calling him a freak, the son of a concubine, a monster, and useless garbage. The young man clutched his head, realizing that this could not be. He raised his head up, exclaiming that his mother could not leave him. The hero opened his eyes wide when the monster tried to swallow him. His eyes filled with energy as he thought what it meant by the enemy. He clenched his teeth, stuck his weapon in, shouted that he had killed his mother. Blood poured out of the monster's body like a fountain. He shouted, holding the protagonist in his arms, that this was a blood-sucking, wondering how a simple boy was able to use his magic. The monster threw him aside, reasoning that the little brat would rather burn all his blood than kill him. The creature put its hand on its chest, thinking that it had spent too much energy on the blood spirits, and it would take a couple more women to replenish its strength. The creature was eating a corpse when a boy appeared behind him, who asked if it tasted good. Sal attacked from behind, asking him if his mother was delicious. The woman shed tears as she called for the boy. The young man opened his eyes wide and responded to his mother in surprise. He pierced the head of an opponent, sitting on his knees. The hero pulled his sword out of the monster's lifeless body. The creature lay on the ground, thinking that the boy was completely insane, and he needed to retreat and find a couple more concubines, otherwise he would do it. The tip went sharply into the back. A smiling guy jumped on the monster, trying to finish him off. The creature raised its head, begging not to kill. It could merge with his sword and become a spirit weapon that would give him more power. Sal looked at him with contempt, saying that the scoundrel did not deserve it. A large amount of red liquid splashed in all directions. The hero was doused from head to toe. It was said that the legacy of swordsmanship after absorption would forever merge with his body. The young man's sword fell to the ground. He bowed his head, chasing away the thoughts in his head that he had almost forgotten that he hadn't seen his mother since birth. It was just a crazy fantasy, realizing that he was a pathetic monster. In the reflection, the silhouette repeated that he was not a monster, and his mother would always be there. The boy turned back when someone called out to him. Adelia ran to him, asking if he was all right. The young man silently looked in her direction when the girl asked why he was covered in blood, whether she was wounded, where, and now she would cure him. The lady grabbed his face, closing her eyes. The hero reasoned that in his past life Adelia had become his concubine. The monster stretched out its hands to the defenseless lady. The girl hugged the guy, trying to call out to him. The main character pressed her to him, frowning, decided that in this life he would not allow anyone to touch her. The head of the man on the guillotine was cut off. It was said that after the disappearance of the demon that was the spirit of Brad's sword, a real strife began in the Cooper family. All the guardians of the Springs of Eden were sentenced to death, and the servants, who saw Sal's rage, no longer dared to behave so rudely with Adelia. Hera showed her evil face. It was said that according to rumors, it was Sal Cooper who stole the spirit sword from the sources, but without sufficient evidence, Alan's mother could only continue her persecution, imprisonment, blood drawing, poisoning. In the reflection of the blade was a young man. It was clear that Sed was still unharmed. For years later, the training ground of the Cooper house. The guy was swinging his weapon up. He begged for mercy. The young man held out his sword to his opponent's head, asking if they really wanted to defeat him being such weaklings. He replied that of course not, he was just magnificent. The two warriors stared at what was happening as Hugh began to talk about hearing that young Master Alan was born with an S-level talent, and that he was convinced of it today, Leon closed his eyes and thanked him. The guys looked around when someone noticed what was in that direction. The main character calmly waited for the soldiers running into the attack, noticed that it was so noisy. He held a sword in his hands, covering his eyes, spoke about the shadow blade. The young man brandished his weapon, neutralizing all the attackers. The guys from the balcony watched this picture, noting the technique. Sal smirked as he held the weapon in his hand as they discussed how usually children his age were still at the level of an iron sword adept, and this kid had clearly reached the level of a silver sword defender, and it was incredible. Alan clenched his fist, musing about how this bastard had dared to steal his triumph. The guy put the blade forward, challenging the main character to a fight. Sal smiled as he asked again, thinking that if Alan had gotten his talent like in his previous life, then his power would be now. The boy stated that it was good, thinking that this was a great chance to find out his current strength. The opponent smiled as he suggested an attack, and thought that this was a great chance to finish him off. People gathered around who shouted in support of the master to beat him, asking Master Alan to show him the real art of swordsmanship. The opponent started, acted, and ran. He struck a blow that was easily blocked by the hero, thinking that it was great, he would defeat him. Sal yawned, holding back the onslaught, and advised him to use his strength, asking if Mother Nature would not favor him. The guy threw his opponent away, raising his weapon up. Alan got angry, bursting with energy, reasoning that it was impossible, because his mother had said that with his current strength, no one could compare to him in battle. The guy was going to attack, which the boy dodged. He thought that he was a weakling, even the magical aura from his sword was simply insignificant. It was obvious that this was only an artificial enhancement. He had no talent for swordsmanship. The young man jumped into the back of the villain, offering to show him what a real blow is. Alan opened his eyes wide, watching the opponent's attack. He pierced his eye, from which blood gushed out. The soldiers ran up to the gentleman, who was holding his eye, shouting for help. The young man laughed at what had happened. Hugh stretched his hand to the side, realizing that he had made a mistake. Wondered if those servants who had just lost to their master could just be pretending. Leon lowered his head, noting that Duke Isaac was being forgotten. The warrior looked up, apologized, and said that after all Mr. Alan was engaged to his younger sister, and he just didn't want her to marry a non-entity. The situation between the guys heated up. When the man noticed that he was worrying too much, if it were not for the marriage of convenience, then it was not known whether his sister would have married at least someone. Hugh asked again about what he had just said. He turned around, leaving the balcony, announced that it was time for him, reminding him not to forget that joint actions between their families would take place in 10 days, saying goodbye. Leon looked down, thinking that Alan was nothing. The man lowered his head, closed his eyes, clarified the name of this shadow. The girl explained that his name was Sal. He was the son of one of his concubines. The Duke watched the protagonist from above, thinking that it was his son. Then it is not surprising why he is so good with a sword, ordered the boy to be brought to his study. A candle was burning on the table. Leon opened his eyes wide. The guy bowed, asking what the master wanted. The man looked at the young man who put his hand on his chest, thinking that he didn't see any innate talent in him, wondering if he was hiding his strength to fight for the right to become an heir, and he definitely had some motive. Fortunately, he was only a boy. It would be easy to expose him. Leon reached for his sword, saying that in 10 days he would lead the 10th Shadow Troop, who would travel with the Isaac family to the Lost Crystal City to retrieve dragon eggs for their families. The Duke held out a weapon, claiming that it was a sword, which would activate the teleportation formation in the Crystal City. The young man looked up, contemplating how to get the dragon eggs. They would certainly collide with the dragon and anger him. He believed that this was not an easy mission and Leon was up to something. Sal stretched out his hands on his knees, wondering how he could miss such an opportunity to get a dragon egg, told his master that he understood. The man was surprised to hear that the young man had a request for him. A girl with white hair sits astride a griffin. She turns her head to Sal and asks if he didn't tell the head of the family that she would accompany him as a servant, and that she wasn't comfortable sitting on the bird all the way, and he told her not to sweat. The young man shifts his gaze to his companions and asks them that they do not mind, because they agree, and they agree with him. The young people approach the mysterious city, and Adelia asks that this is the Crystal City, and that where the crystals and the dragon's nest are. He replies that he does not know. The protagonist lowered his head, and Milady exclaimed that she did not expect that the elite squad of the Cooper family did not even know anything about this city. The red-haired girl crossed her arms over her chest and haughtily said that she was laughing, and the young man asked who she had called stupid. She confidently held out her hand to the young man and asked that he was the same Sal Cooper, and that this was their first meeting, and that he could just call her Gloria. Adelia looked at the protagonist with admiration, and he told her to stay with Meow here, and he would be back soon. The girl agreed, and Milady hissed that the young man did not even look at her. The main character confidently stepped forward, and the red-haired lady said that she was addressing him. The blonde youth turned his head slightly towards the girl and confidently said that he was afraid that if they did not activate the portal before sunset, their entire trip would be in vain. He knitted his brows as the girl called him back to train, and he thought he had met this noisy woman again. The young man put his hand on the hilt of his sword and thought that everything was not important. He could only hope that the stupid bird would cope with the task assigned to it. Gloria and Sal are standing in the center of the altar among the blue magical streams, and the guy is surprised that the altar is glowing. The armored warrior says that this altar is a teleportation formation, calling the guy a Cooper hillbilly, and the main character admires that this is what the Crystal City looks like, and continues that it is beautiful, and somewhere here lies the legendary dragon egg. A young man and a girl stand in front of towering crystals. The protagonist shifts his worried gaze to a blond man in armor, and he declares that it is necessary to finish off the people of the Cooper family, and then the egg will belong to them, and the young man thinks that this is bad. The warrior raises his sword with fury in his eyes and dreams that when they return, the head will definitely reward him. The young man instantly raises his hand and commands everyone to run. A powerful explosion shakes the air. The sentinels of light tower over the lying man. One of them pronounces that they are the guardians of the Crystal City and orders them to attack the attackers. The guy asks for help. Gloria quickly throws her burning sword forward and says that the attackers are pathetic scum. She swings her red-hot weapon and summons the ability to slash spikes. The warrior is lying on the ground, and the girl asks who gave him permission for amateur activity. He replies that it is all for their good, and she declares that it seems to her that he did it only for himself. Milady looks up with frightened eyes, and the warrior shouts that the guardian is behind. A huge luminous stream surrounds Gloria from all sides. The young man moves his hand with the sword to the side. He furiously raises his weapon and orders the shadows to prepare for battle. The guys rush forward at the enemy. Warriors carried their swords into the ground. Guardians soar upward in the channels of purple magic. The protagonist resolutely pushes forward and thinks that he wants to see what is better, the intensity of the light or its shadow. Colored streams of magic fill the entire space. The armored warrior froze at what he saw and said that they had grabbed the guards so easily, and that this was the Cooper family's style, a combination of sword and magic, and added that this was Sal, and that he was only a child, and that he had such power. Gloria looked at the main character with admiration and thought that he was very good. A magic crystal appears floating in the air. The protagonist clutches it in his hand and thinks that it is not bad that he managed to absorb the power of the crystal core, and that he has now moved from the level of a silver blade guardian to a master of the golden sword. A stone pillar rises above the entrance to the Crystal City. The guy looks at the hole in it. He puts the crystal into the keyhole. The young man turns his head apprehensively and asks that it is an earthquake. A block of stone falls down, and the young man says that it is the altar that is falling, and that it is necessary to hurry, that the secret passage to the dragon's lair is open. The altar can be seen at the bottom of the cave. Stone osteophytes hang from the ceiling. Young people are standing on the altar. In front of them, dragon eggs lie in fiery lava. The guys run around the nest. One exclaims that he did not even think that there are so many of them. The second asks that now they do not have to share anything, and the warrior commands them to quickly put them back. The boy reaches out for the egg, and Sal declares that they are idiots for being in such a hurry to become dinner for the dragon. The monster opens its mouth with fury, and the young man says in horror that the demonic dragon has woken up. The protagonist puts a weapon in front of him and commands that when he is done, the guys should take the dragon egg with them, and Gloria asks them not to run away, but to fight. The young man looks at his friend with horror, and asks what he is doing. The guy hugs the stolen egg. He looks at the young man with aggression, and the young man says that he should use the other shadows as bait for the dragon, and when he gets the egg, then let him get out of there and destroy the formation so that the minions of the Isaac family cannot escape, and adds that as for Sal, he will be able to fend for himself, and the young man states that only one family in the entire empire has the right to own the dragon egg. And that family is the Cooper family. The boys wave to him in desperation and shout that he is a bastard and that he should return immediately, and he tells them to sacrifice themselves for the good of the family while he delivers the egg to them. A young man stands on a rising altar. The main character rushes forward, and the girl says that the head of the Cooper family is cruel, and that this is what to do not only to them, but also to his own people, and the guy replies that this is expected. The monster lets off steam from his nostrils, and Milady asks why he came to certain death. If so, the young man replied that she asks too many questions. The monster furiously spews fire at the young man, who says that he cannot die here. Sal aggressively strikes the dragon. He throws the protagonist away from him. Gloria approaches the young man. He is lying face down on the ground. A stream of pink energy rushes into the mouth of the monster. This is the protection of the moon blade. The girl swings her weapon with lightning speed and asks the young man if he is all right. The main character wearily leans on his sword and says that everything is fine, and that she should hold the monster, and he attacks him in the heart. He shifts his concentrated gaze to the girl and says that only she can cope with this. She looks at Sal in fright and agrees. Milady confidently puts her weapon behind her back and thinks that she is also a gifted swordsman, and that this boy should not be allowed to underestimate her. The young man looked at the girl with a smirk. She approaches the magical flash and yells at the guy that now is the time to attack. Gloria looked at the young man in bewilderment and asked why he was standing there, and what he was going to do or not. She swings her sword at the dragon and thinks that the guy has hit so hard that he can't attack, and that at this rate they will all die, and decides that there is only one way out. Milady points her weapon to the side and uses a destructive blade dance. The blade slams into the monster's body and it growls in pain. The head of the monster lies on the ground, and the girl exclaims that she succeeded. Young people enthusiastically kick the defeated dragon. The lady looks at the killed monster and says that she did it. The boy sees his reflection in the dragon's eyes. The monster opens its mouth, and the girl shouts that this is bad and the dragon is furious, and that they urgently look for shelter. Gloria opens her mouth in surprise and asks how this happened. The protagonist brings his fist to his chest. He confidently puts the weapon in front of him, the third sword legacy technique. His eyes fill with rage. The dragon is enveloped in bloody lashes. The guy angrily throws his hand up. He stares intently at his bloody shadows and commands them to pull themselves together. The young guys look at the guy in amazement. One asks that he just turned the dragon's blood into his clones. The second says that this is not all, and that he did not notice what his sacred sword had turned into, and the warrior exclaimed that it was really real blood magic. The girl continued that everything was true, and that forbidden magic, and that only the head of the Cooper family clan had the right to use her on the battlefield. And thinks that she heard that Brad Cooper's spirit disappeared, and that it was the protagonist's doing. Gloria angrily opens her mouth and says that he didn't do anything, and that he was just waiting for her to knock the blood out of the dragon, and shouts that Sal Cooper is a petty bastard, and that how dare he take advantage of her. Sal looks up and asks her what it is. He swings his sword at the monster and reflects that in his past life he was used as if he were scum, and that in this life he will not sit idly by and humbly wait for his death. The dragon's head was cut off. The guys ran to Sal saying that it wasn't bad, the demon dragon had finally been defeated. Gloria noticed the sword in front of her. The enraged protagonist held his face and shouted not to be approached. A purple aura hovered around him. The demon stood behind the guy and asked if he thought he would be able to live in peace after killing him, noting that he would become like him. He would need to absorb a lot of the blood and flesh of his victims. The monster pointed his finger at the MC's comrades and said that this was his prey and he should enjoy it. The creature grabbed the guy by the hair. Sal rushed at his friends, shouting that he needed more blood. He suddenly frowned. Adelia stood in front of him and held out her hand. The protagonist fell to his knees. The girl reached out to him. Sitting over him, she asked the guy to wake up. Looking at him, Adelia reported that MC had finally woken up. She had used a purification spell that had stopped her transformation into a demon, and they were all able to get out of there. The girl rose to her feet. Smiling, she noted that it was the last egg. She said with a satisfied look that she had not told the members of the Asiak family about him, and that red-haired girl had already left, so he did not have to worry. They coped with their task. Standing in front of her, Sal thanked her, noting that he could now rest easy. Holding the sword in his hand, MC thought that originally, he had a plan to save Adelia from the Cooper family. He wanted me out to take her away from there in order to fake her death, to call it all an accident. He pounced on the griffin, shouting that the stupid bird could not cope with even the simplest task. The girl covered the monster with herself and offered to discuss it, and not react so violently. The guys came forward. Reno and Lucian drew their blades. Sal looked at them haughtily and noted that they had finally shown their true colors, and then asked them to try to take the egg from him. He was suddenly taken aback. The guys pierced the body of the hostage. They knelt down. The guys bowed their heads and cried out that they were asking forgiveness for their former rudeness. If it wasn't for the protagonist, then they would have died in the forgotten ruins, abandoned even by their family. From now on, they no longer obey the orders of the family. They would all follow him until death. They would follow him until death and even after it. The guy was surprised. Surprised, Adelia screamed for him to quickly look at the egg. A demonic dragon hatched from an egg. Stretching out his hand, the main character asked if he wanted to be with him. He began to stroke the dragon. The joyful guys shouted that it was great, even the dragon was with them. Standing at the edge of the ledge, MC listened to being congratulated on taming the dragon. Sal's rebel squad was born today. Sunlight enveloped the castle. Sitting on the sofa, Gara hugged her son and said that they would ride horses as soon as the father finished with work. Slamming his hand on the table, the man shouted that there was no point in it. All Alan was doing was having fun. He was no better than this bastard. They knew that the boy named the main character was not only able to kill the dragon, but also tamed her cub. Frowning, the woman noted that it wasn't Alan's fault. If he had been there instead of the protagonist, he would have handled it as well. Leaving there, she said that she had nothing to talk about with her husband. Today they would skate together. The door slammed shut. Running down the corridor, the boy shouted for his whip to be brought to him quickly. Hera glanced at the man and asked how the research on magic deprivation was progressing. Smiling, the butler asked not to worry. They had successfully completed this research. All that remained was to find an S-level test subject to test the spell's functionality, and then use it on Sal. Enraged, Hera replied that it was not bad. This time they would finally get rid of him. 5 years later, Adelia held the staff in front of the guy and said that after that, he would be completely purified, he would be completely protected from turning into a demon, and would be able to use the techniques without any problems. The protagonist thanked her with a smile on his face. Holding the staff in front of her, the girl replied that she should not be thanked, because she should thank him for the new staff. she liked it very much. The guys looked out of the window. Opening the windows, MC shouted that someone was coming. The guys entered the room with the words that they had come with a report on his task. Kneeling down, the boys revealed that they had been spying on the Cooper family's butler, and found out that he had gathered a group of dark magi to perform some kind of ritual 3 days later. He said that they had finally found another person with S-level talent who had incredible magical abilities. Frowning, the protagonist wondered who this target with incredible magical abilities was. The girl was suddenly taken aback. 3 days later, she was looking for something in the warehouse. The man was behind her. He put the handkerchief to her face. Adelia lost consciousness. She was chained in a magic circle. Mysterious magicians performed a ritual. Swinging the blade, the butler thought that when her blood merged with the magic formation, all her power would be his. The girl suddenly disappeared. She was behind him and emphasized the fact that it was just a mere illusion. Frowning, Adelia told me not to underestimate her. She released chains of starlight from her staff. The man was constrained. Turning around, he wondered why the mages were standing there and not helping him. Closing her eyes, the girl thought that Sal had said that after that she should just close her eyes, cover her ears, and sit quietly. Looking up at the sky, the butler asked what was going on. The monsters flew there. They began to kill sorcerers. The dumbfounded man drew attention to the voice that said that he dared to touch Adelia. Apparently the hour of his death had come. The protagonist held the blade on his shoulder. He scratched the man's cheek and ordered him to say why he needed Adelia. Closing his eyes, the butler said that it was because the ritual of deprivation could only be performed once. It was very important to test his performance to make sure that Master Alan would obtain his talent, so he needed to find a person on whom he could test everything. Upset, MC concluded that the girl was in danger because of him. Looking at the man, he said that he could let him go. He cut his palm. Blood began to fall on the magic circle. The guy grabbed the hostage by the hair and ordered him to go back to Madame Cooper and tell her that the ritual was successful. Now she could use it on him. If she didn't, she would find out what would happen. With glowing eyes, he stressed that he needed it to reveal who Alan really was. The man approached the woman and told her that the experiment with the deprivation of magic was successful. Smiling, Hera clarified if this was true, to which she received the answer that it was absolutely true. On the next full moon, which is also a celebration of the young master's coming of age, they would be able to do it. She stressed with a satisfied look that she would finally be able to do it, and would make sure that Alan became the new head of the family without any problems. Smiling, the guy asked if Gloria was pretending to be untouchable, after which he thought that he was very glad that his mother arranged a meeting with his new girlfriend. He was taken aback when the girl brought the blade to his throat. Standing in front of him, she wondered how such a fool could be her fiancé. Swinging her sword, Gloria ordered him to be defeated in a fight first. Their blades crossed. Sal stood before her. Smiling, the protagonist asked if everything was fine with the master, because he had come to save him. Frowning, Alan wondered what made him think that he needed his salvation, because he simply did not take his sword for a walk. The girl hugged him and said that in any case, it was great, they could go and have a duel. An embarrassed Gloria emphasized the fact that not everyone is given the opportunity to fight her, so the guy should think carefully. Clenching his hand into a fist, Alan wondered if the girl had fallen in love with him. Holding the fan in front of her, Hera asked her son to come up to her. He left the boys, saying that since Lady Gloria did not wish to honor him with her presence today, he would leave them. Frowning, the girl stated that now that no one was in the way, if he refused her again, she would immediately attack him, to which she received the answer that they would fight today. But before that, the protagonist had a request. He noted with a satisfied look that he would like to meet her older brother, Duke Isaac. Standing in front of the warrior, MC said that he had a plan to break the marriage contract between Gloria and Alan, but that he would need his help to do so, and asked to lend him a box of illusions. Looking at Gloria's brother's face, Sal began to speculate that in his past life, Duke Isaac was dissatisfied with both Alan himself, who was a lecher, and the union with the Cooper family. He tried many times to break their joint contract, but the royal family rejected his requests. He imagined Isaac kneeling before the king and added that now in this life he could take advantage of it. The warrior rushed past him and asked how someone like him could break the royal contract and still ask him for a favor. Smiling, the protagonist asked again. Holding the sword in his hand, he said that they needed such a sword, because it could solve all their problems. Surprised, Isaac wondered if the Cooper family really had Esther talent. Sal attacked and asked if it was worth getting rid of the insignificant young master, since they could not break the marriage contract. The warrior was taken aback by what he heard. A month later, moonlight enveloped the building. The butler approached Hera and said that everything was ready. The only thing that was wrong was the absence of Sal himself. He was not among the other bastards. The puzzled guys discussed that they did not understand why they were all invited there. Because he was the only one worthy of the right to lead the Cooper family. Because after all, only he had an S-level talent. Looking at the man, they said that all the guests were already in place and they, on his instructions, had set a table for them so that they would not have to wait for him. Isaac asked with a smile on his face if the Duke wanted to chat. Standing in front of him, he noted that after all, this was his future son-in-law's coming-of-age celebration. He also wanted to join in the feast and have fun. The protagonist was standing around the corner from the Duke. A pink aura enveloped the box. The guys pointed their blades at her. A barrier surrounded the castle. Looking up, MC watched the scene. Alan approached him and asked him what he was doing all alone and if he was hiding from the others. Gusts of wind came from the basement. Alan stood in front of the chained MC. He swung his dagger and noted that he was sorry that his talent would now be his. Blood was running down the guy's face. Adelia watched with a frightened look. She fell to the floor while the other girls said it was time for her to stop and go back to work. Looking at the bundle of energy, she thought that this was not a dream, but a vision from a past life. The girl ran away with the thought that Sal was in danger, after which a notification popped up that the power of the stars is a gift that can be discovered by time mages. Wizards who possess it are able to use the power of the stars to see fragments of the past and future. As she moved through the woods, the girl noted that she had to stop Alan before he could get to him. She came across the guys. Stretching out her hand, Adelia asked the light of calm to put him to sleep, after which she noted in her mind that she wanted the guy to fall asleep for several months. She was suddenly taken aback when she was called from the side. The guy rushed at her. He grabbed the girl. Crossing her arms, Hera wondered if Doug had said that the experiment was a success and why she was still able to use magic. Watching the guys, the woman noticed that in any case, now is not the time to think about it. You need to focus on the ritual. The protagonist drank the wine. The glass fell to the ground. Standing over him, Alan stated that he had managed to fall for the same trick twice. Standing in front of the chained MC, he wondered where he got his Esther talent. The young master slapped him and asked how he was able to defeat the demon dragon. Continuing to beat Sal, he clarified how Gloria could fall in love with him. By stabbing him in the stomach, he emphasized the fact that it was all supposed to belong to him. Hera came there and said that this was enough, he should stop splashing out his anger and get down to business. Doug handed him the blade and told him that this dagger was created so that he could pierce his indestructible body. Holding the blade in front of his face, Alan reiterated that he was sorry that the protagonist's talent would be his. He pierced the protagonist's chest with the dagger. The guy shouted with a satisfied look that he would still be the only worthy heir, he would have the best talent of all, together with great strength and impenetrable body. No one would be able to surpass him. MC's face was unfazed. Sal laughed and said that it was a great performance. Hera and Alan were taken aback by this. The protagonist broke free from the chains. Standing in front of them, he asked them to open their eyes and see whose fate was really going downhill. He snapped his fingers. They were suddenly transferred. A crowd of people stood around them. The dumbfounded guest shouted that this was a man who did such a thing in front of everyone. This is who the eldest son of the Cooper family really is, which means that the rumors about his talent turned out to be a lie. The frightened woman asked in her mind how this boy knew what they were going to do to him, adding that now it was important to somehow get out of this situation. Dumbfounded, Alan shouted that they had misunderstood, that the fool had framed him. Isaac began to clap. He walked beside the Duke and said that it was a magnificent performance, after which he clarified what the man thought. The enraged Duke turned to his son. Hera covered the guy with herself and said that she was the one who forced him to do this. If the Duke wants to punish someone, then it is better than her. Alan flew to the side from a powerful blow. Sal calmly remarked that it was cruel. On his knees, the young master said that he didn't understand what he was wrong about, noting that the protagonist was just a pathetic bastard. Everything that belonged to MC was rightfully his. People behind his back discussed that the Duke himself had reached such heights thanks to his personal army and had never hidden it. But for his own son to talk about it so directly, they did not know what would happen to the Duke's situation now. The man grabbed his sword and asked if it was true. Drawing his blade, he asked the children to listen to him, because today the competition for the inheritance begins. The guys were taken aback by what they heard. The guys with glowing eyes came to the conclusion that this means that they can all compete for the right to become the heir. By any means, no restrictions, the winner takes all. First you need to see Alan. Isaac laughed and asked if this was the legendary spirit of the Cooper family. Where power is above all, he finally saw it. Standing in front of the Duke, he added that fortunately it was all over. Now they could break their marriage contract, because he would not allow his sister to marry off to a man who could only talk about being a weakling. Turning around, the man noted in his mind that what had just happened was clearly the action of a box of illusions. It was obvious that Isaac was in cahoots with this child. Looking at the guests, he added that there were many other aristocrats gathered at the party. Any rumor that reached the royal family from them would only harm them, then they should retreat for now and postpone this matter for later. He shook the warrior's hand and asked him not to worry, because he would discuss everything with His Majesty and then contact him. Pointing his sword at the protagonist, the Duke said that everyone can fight for the right of inheritance, but you cannot defame the name of the family by your actions. He stressed with a serious look that the intruder would disappear without a trace. Smiling, Sal asked if the man thought he wanted to be the heir. He touched the blade with his bare hand and noted that if the Duke wanted him to disappear, he could do it now. Taken aback, the protagonist's father asked in his mind what this guy wanted. He sheathed his sword and emphasized that it was enough. Leaving there, the man noticed that he did not want to teach him a lesson, because he was a rather strong guy and he was interested in what he would do next. Looking at MC, he added that he has an unpleasant character. He doesn't even know who he is. The moon shone brightly in the sky. The dumbfounded woman loudly asked the butler where the leak came from and who told this child about their plans. The guy stood over the bound Adelia and clarified what they should do with the servant. Turning around, Hera ordered to throw it to the monsters. She was suddenly taken aback. Looking at the girl, she wondered that Adelia had recently used magic, and it could be either due to the failure of the magic stripping experiment, or... She glanced at Doug and added that she hadn't been deprived of anything at all. The woman with glowing eyes clarified whether he had deprived her of her talent, and whether he would show it now. The man fell to his knees and said that her talent was so high that he still couldn't master it, after which he asked for some time. Doug was taken aback when Hera ordered him to be finished. The warriors pounced on the butler, who shouted that it was Sal who forced him. Blood began to splash to the sides. The woman left the butler's corpse with the words that there was no need for unnecessary explanations, because the dog betrayed its owner, and he killed her for it. She grabbed Adelia by the throat and said that she would rather take her talent and find a much better use for it. Pink energy hovered around them. Examining the girl's body, Hera wondered if there were burns. With a surprised look, she asked if this really meant that she had the body of an ice moon. She imagined people made of mana and emphasized the fact that girls with such a body become amplifiers when they reach adulthood. The man who became the partner of the amplifier will be able to increase his strength through it. Tears flowed down the girl's face. Looking out the window, the protagonist wondered that he didn't think the head of the family would leave Alan in the family after he revealed his true face to the public, coupled with a lack of talent, perhaps due to the influence of Alan's mother. He imagined the image of Hera and wondered why he was allowed to stay in the castle, noting that she didn't have to worry about it. He wouldn't go anywhere until he made Alan go through all the pain he had endured in his previous life. Turning around, MC said that they could enter him, because the door was open. Smiling, Gloria noted that her older brother had said that he had to return the box. She had free time and decided to come and pick it up in person. Frowning, the guy thought that if he enlisted the support of her family, he could even finish off Alan personally. He handed her the box and asked why a box that simply creates illusions, and under very harsh conditions, is their family heirloom if their families are equal to each other politically. Closing her eyes, the girl said that she would not tell him, after which she noted in her mind that no one believed in this legend, and all the aristocrats already knew about it, so she would use this to force Sal to make a deal. MC pointed to the door and said goodbye to her. The guys came to the arena. The girl rushed into battle. Their blades collided. Gloria jumped away suddenly, holding the blade in front of her throat. The guy stated that she had lost again. As he was leaving, the guy pointed out that she had asked him not to hold back, and according to their agreement, she should tell him the secret of the box of illusions. She imagined Adelia restraining the box and told her that it was just a legend. No one knew for sure if it was true or not, that a person who had mastered the power of the stars themselves, as well as the magic of time, could use the box to bring another person back to life, at the cost of his own. Frowning, the protagonist looked at his hand and came to the conclusion that it turns out that in his past life, Adelia sacrificed her life to bring him back to this world, which means that now he must not only avenge his death, but also take care of his savior. He will not allow this monster Alan to get to her again. The guys burst into the room shouting that they had bad news, Mrs. Adelia had been kidnapped. The guy was furious at what he heard. Standing opposite, the boys told me that last night, when they were preparing the box, they had seen Madame Cooper being led away by Madame Cooper's men. Gloria remembered how she had passed the maids, who were discussing what they had heard from the other maids that the young master had taken Lady Adelia into his service, and that soon, when she came of age, she would become his concubine. She noted with a thoughtful look that at first she thought they meant Sal when they spoke of the young master. The protagonist ran away from there, shouting that he would finish off Alan. The enraged guy shouted that MC was a fool who dared to humiliate him in front of such a crowd of nobles. The most horrible death in the world awaited him. He kicked the servant and ordered the protagonist to be killed. The guy with a smile on his face noted that he had heard that Sal really liked the girl caught by his mother, so he could take revenge on her for now. The young gentleman came at her, saying that he promised her that under his guidance she would become a bad girl. Frightened, Adelia thought that the chains were holding back her magical power. She had nothing to do, so there was only hope for MC. Stretching out his hand, the guy noted that she had better get used to her role as a concubine as soon as possible. The main character hit him in the face. The guy flew aside. He kicked his opponent, and cried out that he wanted him dead. Alan suddenly cried out in pain. Frowning, Sal continued to attack. The master's bones began to crack. A dark aura enveloped the protagonist. The fiery aura threw people away from him. The guys ran there. Adelia was released. She ran to the guy while Gloria shouted that she needed to act faster, before he began to turn into a demon again. The girl hugged him and asked him to wake up. The servants tried to drag their master out of there. Gara was taken aback when she saw her beaten son. Pointing her finger at MC, she wondered if he had repaid his father for allowing him to stay in the castle. Sal straightened his necklace. With a sword in his hand, he began to go at them. The frightened woman asked what the guy was doing. The guy cut his palm. He stained the young master's head with blood and declared that he was challenging him to fight to the death to the last drop of blood, after which he thought that he could not allow such a threat to Adelia's life to continue to live in this world. We were transported to 7 days later, to the competition arena, where the guys stood opposite each other. Smiling, the protagonist said that he did not expect that Alan would actually come, and not spend all these 7 days escaping. Bowing, the guy clarified why he should suddenly miss such an opportunity to crush him like a pathetic insect. He looked at his opponent's shield with a serious look and thought that it gave him goosebumps. The jellyfish's petrification beam flew beside him. He began to dodge the shots. Sal calmly thought that the Oath of Shadows would not help against the shield of the jellyfish, because petrification does not even count as damage, so he will not be able to deflect it with an oath, which means he must destroy it. He prepared to make a dash and listened to the fact that no one would have thought that by depriving Alan of the blade of the Perseus, he had given him the shield of a Medusa. That was the difference between someone who favored fate and someone who resisted it. He began to get closer to the enemy. Taken aback, the guy called for a jellyfish. The shield covered him. With a swing of his blade, MC sliced through the shield. Blood flowed from the eyes of the jellyfish. His blade began to be covered with pieces of stones. Enraged, Sal cried out that he wanted him dead. He rushed past the enemy. Smiling, the young master announced that he was now a golden staff mage. He summoned the spirits and urged them to devour the boy. Dumbfounded, Duke Isaac wondered that it would take thousands of innocent souls to wield this magic. Frowning, Brad said that this is the secret of their family. He asked to respect their traditions. After cutting the spirits, Alan wondered if he would even dodge. He said with a surprised look that it was impossible. He had practiced with this ability hundreds of times. It was impossible to just break through them without taking a single hit. Skulls flew at MC. A dark aura enveloped him. With glowing eyes, he noticed that the guy had had enough fights, but it was time to die. He made an attack. One of the servants was wounded. The puzzled protagonist noted in his mind that he had forgotten that the oath automatically transfers any damage to his shadow. Alan raised the staff above his head, after which a notification popped up that the staff of life absorbs the life force of another person and attacks the chosen target. If the life force of the target is less than the life of other people collected in the staff, then it will die immediately. This is incredibly terrifying, vicious black magic. Adelia stood among the servants from whom the life force was being sucked. The guy with a mad look said that all these bastards deserved such a fate. Sal plunged the blade into the floor. The blade was covered with magic circles. The red aura began to spread. The surprised guys shouted that the life force had returned. The dragon flew over the barrier. The black monster destroyed the blue dome. Standing over Alan, the protagonist asked him to enjoy his last breath. Smiling, he looked at the dragon and asked if he was angry too. Isaac was dumbfounded and wondered if the legendary dragon armor really existed. Looking at the monster, he said that according to legend, if you tame a demonic dragon, then a real spiritual bond can be formed between it and the owner. Under the influence of strong emotions, the dragon can change its form and strengthen all the abilities of its master. Armor covered MC's body. Frightened, Alan began to shout that this simply could not be. Even if he had received the blessing of this little creature, he would never be able to reach an understanding with it. He began to gather the energy in his hands and added that it must be another illusion. Now he would dispel it. A huge monster appeared in front of him. Sal spread his wings. He carried out a series of attacks and sliced the creature. Alan was frightened by this. The protagonist chopped off his hand and emphasized that it was because he stole innocent talents from them. Gara was shocked by what she saw. The guy summoned another monster. The guy suddenly jumped up from the ground. He pierced through the body of the undead and noted that for all those shadows who died for him, the one whom he had killed in a previous life, from whom he had taken away his natural gift. Frowning, MC noted that this was for all the evil that Alan had done in the past, present, and future. He found himself in front of the young master. The bullet hit his sword. Gara lifted her son in her arms and saved him from the attack. Smiling, Duke Isaac revealed that her nobility Lady Hera was once a magnificent S-level magus. He never imagined that he would be honored to see her on the battlefield. Especially after her marriage to Lord Brad, she had used a magical artifact to erect 8 circles, and then clarified if the rumor that she had lost her magical powers during the murder of the previous head of the Cooper family was true. Purple mana hovered around her. Folding her hands, the woman created a holy spear and noticed that she knew that the protagonist would become a monster. She should have finished him off while he was still a child. Now she would correct her mistake. Sitting on the throne, Brad cried out that everyone immediately stopped. The spear suddenly shattered. The armor fell from the protagonist's body. The warrior said with a thoughtful look that, as expected from a swordsman of silence, nothing could overcome his forbidden cry. Standing between them, the Duke said that he had no place in the Cooper family. He had to gather his men and leave. Brad pointed his finger at his wife and ordered her to get out of his territory, otherwise she would regret it. The guys left there. Sunlight enveloped the mountainous area. Mr. Isaac rode a horse next to Sal and asked if he would like to join their family, after which the main character clarified if he understood that he was now an outcast and this would be a declaration of war on the Cooper family. Isaac was taken aback by what he heard. Looking at the castle, the protagonist stated that he was afraid that he could not join their family, but he could offer a deal. The king was terminally ill, the War of the Nobles was inevitable, but he could assure him that if he got to the Royal Academy, he would be the first to receive the latest news from the capitals. After which the warrior asked if the guy wanted him to help him get into the academy, and why would he suddenly believe him. Smiling, MC thought that since he had an S-level talent for swordsmanship, it was time to use this trump card. Looking at the building, he remarked that he should be believed because he could become a disciple of the silent holy blade Chris. A drunken man was lying in front of the building. Opening his eye, he asked who else remembered him. A notification popped up that it was Chris's silent blade, whose level was a veteran sword master. His sword speed surpassed even the sound of his strike. The blade was in the enemy's body faster than he could even hear the wind cutting through. At first glance it seemed to be a silent elimination technique, but in fact it was a very fierce and powerful fighting style that tears through the enemy's armor with its incredible punch force. Sal and his partners were standing on the outskirts near the city of St. Gore, and the protagonist said that those 3 towers in the distance were the defensive barrier of St. Gore, the Holy Trinity, and then added that if someone noticed them in the distance, then it was not long before the city was left, after a few days. The red-haired man looked at the hero and warned that even outside the academy, Sun Mountain was full of other aristocrats, so he had to be careful. Tired Sal looks at his incessant comrade and thinks that this guy cannot be trusted in any case, because he is always ready to stab in the back if it will benefit his family, which means you need to find a way to get rid of him. The sun shines on the squad, and the young man told Sal not to worry, because he would take care of his entry into the Royal Academy. Adelia would become his servant, so they could both live together, and then added that as for his soldiers, they could temporarily serve in the Isaac family's mansion as guards, where they would guard their estate from all sorts of thieves. A strange feeling pierced the head of the protagonist, who raised his head and could not believe that the thieves were so close to St. Mountain, and then realized that this was his chance. The group rushed forward, and someone said that although they are called simple thieves, it is known that they are only the shadow hands of the aristocrats of St. Mountain, which is why the showdown with them is a real hassle, to which the hero said that they should provide the thieves to him, and one of the members of the group asked what they should do to Lady Adelia. Sal rides his horse and says that she is only going to get in the way, and then asks Mr. Isaac to accompany her to the Royal Academy. The boy and girl rolled their eyes, and the red-haired man sadly said that they would first settle this boy's people in the manor. The protagonist looks at the camp in the thicket of the forest. The hero lowered his head thoughtfully, and thought that judging by Angela's story in her past life, she must have been captured by robbers when she was about 7 years old. Sal jumped down from the tree and remembered that the Holy Blade Chris was her father, who had been looking for his daughter for many years and was ready to do anything to save her. The dragon flies over the protagonist, who mentally says that if he manages to free her from captivity, he will have a chance to become his apprentice. Energy envelopes the hero's legs. Spiritual power resonates around Sal, who stretches his fists for the upcoming fight. Bandits trained with spears. Something flew over the instructor. A cut appeared on the guy's neck. Blood rushed to the ground. Something struck the archer. Horror filled the eyes of the bandit, who looked up with horror. Indifference surrounded the protagonist, who stood near the corpses of defeated opponents. The first hereditary swordsmanship technique, the glitter of a bloody shadow. The hero rushed to attack. A hellish flame snake burst out of Sal's blade. The second ancestral swordsmanship technique, the unrestrained feast of blood snakes. Hatred overwhelmed the leader of the bandits' plan, who made an attack on the protagonist, and then wished the latter death. The hero blocked the enemy's attack without any problems. Sal abruptly soared up and said that this was the third ancestral swordsmanship technique, namely the decapitation of the blood shadow. A sharp realization hit the man in the head, who turned around in horror and noticed that it was the sword of the blood demon, which meant he was of the Cooper family, but did not have time to tell who they were. Sal indifferently blew off Plan's head. 2 amorphous silhouettes appeared on the battlefield. The protagonist stands in front of his spears and says that bandits are just a bunch of evil creatures, which means he doesn't care who they are. A white griffin flies to the hero. Sal smiled and wanted to ask the pet if he had found the place he had asked for. The protagonist stretched out his hand and asked the griffin to lead him there. The guy pressed the stone button. The stone door opened with a crash. The hero silently goes down the stairs. Hope was reflected in the girl's eyes, who raised her head and assumed that he had come to save her, to which Sal replied that he had come to take her to her father, because he wanted to become his apprentice, and he thought that Angela had said that since childhood she could see a person's intentions and whether he was telling the truth. The child stretched out his hand and happily said that he was not lying, which meant they could go. Rays of light from the passage illuminate the protagonist with a girl in his arms. The guy tiredly raised his head and said that they would not be let out of here just like that. A huge skeleton looks at people. The hero turned towards his strong opponent and said that this time, he and the dragon were putting their lives on the line. Sal raised his sword and told Angela to get ready. The protagonist exhaled tensely. The guy swung for a blow. Rage filled the skeleton, which tried to hit the hero. Sal blocked the attack and shouted for Angela to act. The child runs away from the scene of the battle in terror. The armor crumbles on the protagonist's body, who says that the dragon armor has another ability, which means it's time to test its powers. A red aura envelopes the guy who shouted for the dragon to take off his armor. Removing the dragon armor is an ability that instantly separates the armor from the wearer's body, removing it and immediately releasing all the accumulated magical power, creating a wave of incredible power that can stun the enemy and save lives. Overwhelmed with confidence, the hero turned around and said that just a skeleton would not be an obstacle to his revenge. The skeleton looks in the direction of the child, and Sal realized that all that remains is to take Angela and leave here together. The monster released a void ball and wished the girl death. There was a colossal explosion, and the protagonist shouted the name of the child. The sun illuminates the griffin's wing. The creature has difficulty keeping Angela in the air. Sweat runs down the griffin's tense head. The child falls into the boy's arms. The hero stands in front of the symbol and realizes that this is a closed magical formation, which means that in order to escape, they need to destroy its core. The projectiles approach Sal, who says that as long as this thing is chasing them, they won't be able to find him safely. The girl smiled and suggested that the core he was talking about might be in a place that no one was allowed to go to, and the protagonist asked if she knew of such a place. Angela pointed her finger at the building and told her that when she was released from the dungeon, there were only 3 places where it was forbidden to go, and in front of them was one of them, which was the closest to them, and the guy said that they would start the search from it. Monstrous explosions are heard behind the hero, who says that although the skeleton is strong, it is quite slow, but at a long distance it is able to throw no less powerful magical projectiles. Sal kicked down the door and explained that he was not wearing armor now, which meant that even a single shell could severely wound him. The protagonist looks at a huge blood core and notices that this room has clearly been reinforced, but it won't last long. The child with a strange look looks ahead and says that this bow is calling her. The guy took a step towards the core and asked her to look only at him. A small model of a bow appeared in the hands of a surprised girl. Angela happily raised the weapon, and the hero assumed that it was a blessing from the sylph, and the child replied that his assumption was correct, and also reminded that soon there would be a big monster here, which meant it was time for them to go to the next place. The creature that was looking at people was filled with rage, and the girl explained that the second place was in that direction. Sal opened the door to the black core, and Angela noticed that they had found it. A golden glow enveloped the black shiny core. The protagonist looks ahead in shock. The skeleton exuded demonic energy, and the boy realized that the wizard who created the skeleton bruiser had ordered it to self-destruct. The hero lowered the child to the ground and said seriously that his next trick could drive him crazy, so she, Angela, must save herself at all costs if that happened, and the girl replied that she believed in him. Sal stands in front of a smiling demon and thinks it's time to use the power of the sword, a quarter ancestral swordsmanship technique. The protagonist made a lunge and explained that this was a bloodbath technique. Red cracks began to spread out across the sphere. A dirty hand grabbed the young man's hand. Something touched the guy. The creature holds the hero and says with pleasure that now he belongs to him. The tired head of the royal guard sleeps in the corner. The capital is St. Gore, the Royal Academy. The servant knelt in front of Chris and reported that the second prince's soldiers had left the city, and then asked if it was worth sending their fighters after them. The man opened one eye with difficulty and asked if Sanders had left the countryside. The bottle fell to the ground, and someone asked him to look after his wine, because he would definitely come back for it when he personally checked everything. The hand is holding a wooden vessel. The masked man tilted his head and noticed that the master was finally free. Clouds were gathering over the bandits' camp. The child looked at the strange Sal. The protagonist's face twisted into a hellish smile. The griffin saved the girl from the guy's blow. Angela lies on the ground and addresses the hero. The dragon attacked the gloomy master. Possessed, Sal tried to hit his companion. A griffin stands in front of a child. The girl began to fill the bow with energy and remembered the protagonist's last words. Angela was overwhelmed with determination, who pulled the bowstring and thought that for his sake, she would definitely survive. The arrow flew towards the protagonist. The griffin once again saved the child from the attack of the possessed guy. The companions looked forward. Madness overwhelmed the body of the hero, who smiled and, after calling the child a charming young apple, asked which part of it to try first. A monstrous force pressed on the girl, who realized that she could not move. Sal picked Angela up and noticed with some madness that she had pure blood, and then added that he wanted to open her chest and let her sprinkle his body. The child closed his eyes and told the protagonist not to be upset, because he had done everything he could. A tear runs down the face of the possessed guy. A calm hero stands against the background of a wave. Anger filled Sal's gaze, who raised his head and shouted that the blood demon should not dare to go so far. The creature froze and was surprised to notice that this was impossible, because it could not wake up on its own. A red aura enveloped Sal, and the monster asked him not to resist, because he could not stop the inevitable, because his will obeys him, to which the protagonist noted that he really had a bad effect on his own will. The guy looked confidently ahead and explained that he would only need to do one thing. The hero used the bloodsucker skill, and the inner demon shouted that he would destroy himself, and even if he survived, he would never become a swordsman again. The aura of a desperate monster burst out of Sal's body, who asked the monster not to worry, because Chris would soon help him solve the problem, and then added that he was already finished, and the creature said dejectedly that if he continued to pin his hopes on others, he would only doom himself to inevitable failure. Yubiya from Sanders' squad approached the hero and said that this was the guy who had brought His Majesty so much trouble. The old man swung for a blow and wished death to Sal. The girl stood in front of the protagonist's body and shouted that he should not dare to harm her brother. A couple of clear cuts cut the man's hand, who did not have time to understand what it was and what was wrong with his hand. Chris hugged Angela and said that she had gone through so much suffering over the past few years, and then apologized for her father being so late, and then summed up that they were going home. The child stretched out his hand in the direction of the hero and shouted that his brother should not be left here. The tired man turned around and said that he could help him with the treatment if he wished. Sal looked up with difficulty and replied that he wanted much more, because he had risked everything to save Angela and become his heir. Chris, with a sarcastic smile, holds the protagonist and says that in the end he saved her with his own hands, to which the guy confidently noted that although his recklessness led to significant complications, in the end he was able to snatch her from the grip of the second prince. 7 days later, the man was walking with the guy through the academy, and then the head of the royal guard said that although the hero had not yet fully recovered, he had already notified everyone in the city that he would become his future heir, and Sal assumed that he was now the #1 enemy for the entire academy, to which Chris replied that he could give up his future title and teacher at any time. The protagonist turned around and after saying that he had killed his entire family, and suggesting that he had lied to Chris, he said that he wanted to achieve much more than just a legacy, and then added that a couple of evil students would not stop him. The blade approached the stunning hero. William, who as an ordinary student took first place in the martial competition of the Royal Academy and was also a master of the sword, raised his sword and stated that Sal was the killer of his brothers, as well as a vagabond who decided to deceive Master Chris, and then added that he challenged the protagonist to a duel, where he would deprive the latter of all this undeserved honor. The guy stands against the background of his opponents and understands that such a bloodthirsty aura could not be suppressed by all the other enemies around him, namely Prince Sanders and the Bandit Lord, and then realized that it was their plan to take advantage of William's sense of justice to set him against him. The contempt could be seen in the eyes of the guy who held the blade and said that if he dared to refuse this duel, he would simply have to leave Master Chris and abdicate the title of his heir. The hero confidently took out a scarlet sword and remembered that in his previous life, William had also been used to challenge him to a duel, and then added that he could not believe that this would happen again, but everything should happen the same as before. But he said aloud that he accepted his challenge, but if he lost, he would have to swear allegiance to him until his death. The crowd looked at the two swordsmen and shouted for William to nail him, as well as demonstrate that only the best of the best can get into the Imperial Academy, not mongrels. Determination overwhelmed the guy, who concentrated his energy in the blade and shouted for Sal to defend himself. The hero dodged the slash with a jerk, using a bloody slash. Starch was playing on the strings of William's subconscious when the protagonist appeared behind him and told him to just give up, because he was not even his equal. The disciple used a chi blast, and a surprised Sal mentally said that it was bad because he had interrupted his attack, and he would be able to use the blood slash again in 10 seconds. The guy made a lunge towards the protagonist, who remembered that this was his strongest technique, which meant that he had learned it while still at the academy. William jumped up and shouted for him to surrender. The slashing blade approached the hero's head, and the swordsman shouted for him to repent of his deception. The superiority came from Sal's body, who began to smile mysteriously. The protagonist blocked the attack with an aura and remembered Chris's words about how blood magic is very different from other schools of magic, and in his current state, the maximum would be to use the second technique at the level of a silver sword master, and if he tried to use the third technique, then it could not only summon the image of a blood demon, but also simply break the body of an immature body. And the hero mentally said that the teacher should forgive him, because for the sake of William's recognition and his loyalty, he is ready to take such a risk. Sal dodged the attack, and the apprentice shouted that it was all over. The protagonist soared into the air and said that it was the 1,000 blood blade technique. Bloody daggers approached the guy, and someone shouted for him to turn around. The blonde man put the blade to the neck of the young man, who could not believe that swordsmanship could do such a thing, and the hero said that he was pleased to see that funny expression on the face of honest and faithful William again. Madness overwhelmed Sal, who began to laugh. A strange aura erupted from the protagonist's body, and the swordsman noticed that something was wrong with it. Students look at a crazy guy. The sorcerer with a serious expression on his face began to accumulate energy in the staff. The frost mage raised his hand. Purple mana began to thrust into the sorcerer's staff, and someone shouted that it was magic, and then added that it was expected that this freak would use forbidden techniques. The swordsman stood in battle stances, and the unknown noticed that such demonic power was possible only if he had killed a huge number of people, which meant that he needed to be destroyed immediately. William raised his blade at his comrades, who said that it did not concern him at all, and then added that he should not sacrifice himself for this monster, to which the young man replied that after losing the duel, he swore allegiance to him until his death, which meant that even if he was really a bad person, he would protect him to the end. Someone took a step. Chris knocked out the hero with one blow and said that he was just as problematic as he was in his youth. The head of the Royal Guard turned around and said seriously that they, the students of the Imperial Academy, shouldn't act so meanly by duels with a wounded man, but he assured them that when Sal returned to normal, they would have as many battles as they wanted. Fear overwhelmed the disciples, who looked ahead in shock and said that they were very scared, the word he was ready to kill them at any moment. Moran Shavat looked at Sandro, who angrily said that he had heard that the hero had come here on the recommendation of a nobleman, and then asked his comrade to walk with him to the main hall of trials. The antagonists look at the man with Sal in his arms, and the prince thinks that if he really uses blood magic, then this is a great school for suicide. The girl goes and hesitantly asks Cassidon's teacher for permission to help Sal, because only she can cope with the demon that torments him, and the sorceress asked her not to be stupid and stay away from him, because he practices evil blood magic, to which Adelia reminded her that she told her that the school of magic has no effect on whether a mage is good or bad. Mystic looked ahead seriously and replied that it was true, because the character of a person had nothing to do with the school of magic that he had chosen, but his magic was completely different from ordinary blood magic. Chris sits on a chair in the middle of the battles and reveals that if he wants to master the art of blood swordsmanship with blood magic, he must be in perfect condition, both physically and psychologically. The hero lies in a green liquid, and the man reminded that all these 7 days he worked tirelessly to help his body recover. An image of the head of the Royal Guard lessons appeared, who added that he would teach him how to use the power of his own blood, instead of ki, to enhance his own body and use blood swordsmanship. Chris forced an angry smile and noticed that Sal thanked him by getting into a stupid fight without even fully recovering, and then added that if he wanted to destroy himself so badly, he would never take revenge on the Coopers for all their deeds. The protagonist gave his mentor a sly look and replied that he was not stupid enough to kill himself, but there were things he needed to do at all costs, and he trusted his master and knew that he would not let the successor student go mad and start killing everyone indiscriminately. The dean of the Academy's combat department, George, was standing in the aisle, and Chris tried to understand what he was doing here, and then added that he was not welcome here, to which the old man replied that he was outside the door, not inside. The man turned around and stated that Sal was a recommended student at the Academy, and according to the rules, he had exactly 1 week to complete the tests to prove that he was worthy of studying at their academy. The dean turned around and irritably told Chris not to let whims interfere with the work of the academy, because maybe the rector will tolerate it, but he is not going to do it. The hero looked at the tired mentor and suggested that he had some problems with him, to which the head replied that it was just a stubborn old man who miraculously did not die by his hand, but as long as he did not violate the rules of the academy, then he should not worry about him, and the protagonist suggested that it was better for him to complete all the tests as soon as possible. To which the teacher replied positively and added that he should prepare well, because the old man conducts them himself, which means it will not be easy. That same night, the antagonist stood near the entrance to the dungeon, and Sandro reminded that old man George had prepared their way to the Sal dungeon as a test, and the main task of Moran Shavat was to poison the water in it before the arrival of the hero. Filled with rage, the monsters look ahead. The guy smiled and assumed that he would go so mad that Mr. Chris would simply have no choice but to kill him. The next day, Sal and William were standing in the hallway, and the protagonist reminded his friend that they would talk after receiving the task, to which the young man said that the next test would be too difficult, to which the hero agreed with his friend, because George had been sharpening his teeth on his teacher for a long time, which means that he would deliberately complicate everything. The swordsman raised his hand and said that the academy was quite difficult now, because everyone had gathered in the main hall. The student on duty, Philip, who was George's student, was sitting at the table, and William added that they were all waiting for him to come. The girl looks at Sal anxiously. The bespectacled man smiled slyly, and the protagonist said that he wanted to take part in the trial, to which the dark-haired man asked for his name and faculty, to which the hero introduced himself and added that he was from the combat faculty. Philip turned around and apologized to Sal, because there were unforeseen changes in his test dungeon, and they were that its difficulty was increased to extreme, which means that a group of at least 4 people is now required, and his partner asked to change the task to normal difficulty, which can be completed by 1 person. The man with a sly smile raised 3 fingers and said that the trial for singles would be ready only by the beginning of next week. However, according to the rules of the academy, Mr. Sal must complete the first test within 3 days in order to officially become a full-fledged student. A hypocritical gut seemed to burst out of Philip's body, who tilted his head and mockingly asked if the protagonist wanted to try to find people for his group, or calmly leave their academy safely, and other students of the academy added that the hero left the academy, because they did not need such scum like him, and also tried to understand why Philip was offering him anything at all. After all, he had to be locked up for 3 days to be thrown out of here. Overwhelmed with determination, Sal smiled and suggested that the bespectacled man thought he wouldn't be able to find a team, and the guy replied that he didn't care, but it seemed that the rest of the students didn't really want to see him in their ranks. The protagonist angrily put the blade to the dark-haired man's throat after his words that the others did not want to become tame dogs like Wilhelm. The hero confidently raised his head and said that if he could find his teammates, he would kneel down and apologize to William for such an insult. Philip smiled mischievously and told Sal not to even dream about it, because if he wanted him to bow down to him, he would have to kill him, to which the protagonist replied that he would not kill him, but instead would tell the truth to his teacher Chris, who would not leave his student offended. The apprentice touched the blade and smugly reminded Sal that he had to assemble a team of 4 people before evening, and the hero replied that there was no need to give him time until evening if only 4 people were needed. The comrades look at the protagonist, and Adelia, who is a student of the magic department, and Gloria, a student of the combat department, said that they want to create a team with Sal, and the guy sarcastically asked Philip to register their team. The hero stands against the background of death with a scythe and haughtily added that the bespectacled man should kneel down and ask for forgiveness. Sal turned around and asked if the dark-haired man was willing to risk his life to make it difficult for him, and the students couldn't believe how he dared to do that, and someone had told the villain to always be evil, and Philip on duty to just follow the rules, and the hero had used Mr. Chris's good name to intimidate him. Wilhelm raised his hands and sadly said that there was no need to go that far for him, and the protagonist replied that as long as they were not wrong and did nothing wrong, no one had the right to stand in their way, and he never made mistakes. The dean was standing next to the evil youth who hissed that he wanted to finish off the hero with his own hands, and the old man reminded him not to forget about decency and not to violate the rules of the academy, and also remembered the humiliation he felt today, and turned these feelings into fuel for his strength, and only then could he appear as death itself in the flesh and take his life. After all, there will be a time when he will not be constrained by the rules. The group was standing in front of a portal in the jungle of Melissa. William touched his face and revealed that they were now in the jungles of Melissa, and according to legend, the legacy of this powerful sorceress had been hidden somewhere here. However, despite the fact that the academy had owned this dungeon for several hundred years, none of the students had been able to find this legendary legacy. An image of the distribution of levels on the location appeared, and the young man said that he was coming out of this dungeon by the lake, which was at the very top of the local mountain, and then added that the foot of this mountain was the most dangerous place in the dungeon, because there were monsters of the nightmarish level, which could be compared to the sword master in strength, and near the top it was quite the opposite. After all, there are only next-level monsters, and at the lake itself, they stop attacking anyone at all. The squad is standing in the middle of a misty valley, and William continued his story by saying that the mists in this jungle are poisonous, and a master of the golden sword will be able to hold out here for about 10 hours, thanks to his physical stats, while a mage of the same level, depending on his own mana, will only be able to hold out in battle for 6 hours. Sal looked ahead and said in a commanding tone that everyone should prepare for battle, because something was approaching them. A swarm of beetles is chasing a squad of people. William raised his sword and said that it was a swarm of Melissa, and not only were they extremely tenacious, but killing them would not do any good, which meant that it was better to just stay away from them, because then they would leave, and the girl explained that it was useless, because they had been running away from them for 20 minutes, and several times they completely changed direction, but the monsters did not lag behind. People are fleeing from the horde. Blushing, Adelia raised her paws. A mesh barrier surrounded the group. William rolled his eyes and asked irritably what the cat purr spell was. The protagonist raised a scarlet blade and said in annoyance that they had been running from them for 20 minutes, and didn't even have the courage to take up the sword and fight them back, and after that, they called themselves talented warriors. A red snake appeared from the blade of the hero, who explained that it was a blood snake. A scarlet beam rushed towards the beetle. Blood energy destroys dozens of bugs. Sal looked ahead in exasperation and noticed that they weren't even getting stronger, and then tried to figure out what kind of vile and useless monster they were. The girl sits and says with relief that they are finally saved, and the protagonist tried to understand if she was ashamed that she was saved by her rivals. The girl closed her eyes and haughtily said that the hero was a village savage who did not even understand anything. Hundreds of red lights stared out of the purple mist at the people, and a woman's voice added that no nobleman could consider him a pathetic bastard, that he could inherit either a title or his own surname as his rival, and if he had the brains to offer to accompany them before leaving, perhaps she had offered to be her servant. The frightened student jumped up and tried to figure out what it was. The squad took a fighting stance, and Gloria assumed that the swarm had attracted the attention of other monsters, and William shouted at everyone to be careful, because something was clearly wrong with these monsters. A clawed paw emerged from the mist. The huge creature opened its mouth wide. The hero smiled and said with pleasure that it didn't matter, because they would just finish them all off. Sal dodged the creature's swift attack. The art of blood swordsmanship is a fighting style based on the use of blood magic and passed down in the Cooper family from generation to generation. The fire blade pierced the monster's body. Due to the fact that this style uses magical power instead of physical, the movements during the fight become so sharp and unpredictable that it becomes almost impossible to resist it. The protagonist killed the monster with the skills bone spikes and carnage, and to become stronger like warriors during physical training, you need only one thing, and that is to kill. The blade has passed through the upper part of the monster's mouth. It must control the blood and use it. The blood of the defeated smoothly absorbs the body of the hero. He must absorb, improve his blood. This is the essence of blood magic. Sal saved Adelia from wolves in time with the help of blood blades. A simple blood mage cannot develop his abilities so quickly in battle because of his fragile body. But a blood swordsman is not limited to this. Madness echoed from the depths of Sal's soul, who lowered his gaze. The power of the spilled blood does not matter, because every drop will only make the owner of this style stronger. A demonic smile appeared behind the back of the possessed hero. The only problem with this style is that all the anger and hatred accumulated in the collected blood will not disappear, but on the contrary, will merge into the image of an immortal demon inside the warrior himself. The girl neutralized the curse and tried to understand how Sal felt, an eternal, unbreakable curse that only truly outstanding willpower could suppress. The protagonist took a step forward and told her not to worry, because thanks to the treatment of his teacher Chris, even high-level monsters are not a problem for him. Negative energy began to permeate the hero's body. A colossal volume of blood-red aura burst out of the possessed Sal's body. The girl raised her hand and said that it was a star shield. The redhead turned and assumed that the same thing was happening to him as in the dragon's nest, and Adelia explained that this time the sensations were completely different, but she did not have time to finish. The aristocrat raised her head haughtily and interrupted, saying that anyone who uses blood magic is doomed to lose their minds, because this is the natural course of things, and then added that the first and second lords of the Cooper family have gone mad because of this magic. And it is even rumored that the current head has become a silent blade master in order to protect the entire family from her pernicious influence. The golden energy burst out of Adelia's hand, who said that the starlight would bind them and establish a stellar connection, and the apprentice said in exasperation that using such a spell on a madman was extremely life-threatening. A red glow enveloped the girl's eyes. The demon sits in Sal's inner world and cannot believe that there are still people willing to risk themselves to save him. The blonde turned around and tried to understand what he had done to the protagonist. The creature released violet energy and explained that it had not done anything, because the boy had chosen this path himself, and then told that the progenitor of the Cooper family, who created it, had just died from this thing. The monster looked with 3 eyes and offered the girl a deal, which was that he would tell her how to save him, and in return, she would allow the seed of a blood demon to be planted in her heart. The demon began to laugh madly after Adelia's consent and shouted that good people are always so stupid. The blue-eyed woman furrowed her brows and said in her mind that she would definitely save Sal. The woman gently touched the hero and said that the starlight would purify him, and then added that this was the star flow technique. The aristocrat looked up stupidly and noted with irritation that at such a young age she was already able to use the spells of the seventh circle, and then tried to understand how much time she spent reading books, and then noticed that they all really did not have a personal life. The redhead blocked the attack and shouted for the noble lady to either help them or shut up. The demon laughs behind the protagonist's back and says that he was saved again by a little girl and then called him a loser. The hero waved it off and tried to chase the monster away, and the creature said that if he hadn't promised that girl to save him, he wouldn't have even thought of appearing in such a dirty place. The demon raised his hand and said that he would only show it to him once, so he should remember it well. The blood energy began to form a crystal in a vortex, and the monster said that he needed to learn to understand the blood that he had absorbed, find out what kind of flow was taking away his control over him and get rid of it, because if he allowed this stuff to take over his body again, then he would finish off this girl. The aura circles around the red stone. The silhouette of the creature raised its head and mockingly said that they would soon meet again. Rage raged in the heart of the hero, who looked up and whispered that next time he would regret their meeting. Flames surrounded Sal, who shouted that this was a feast of blood snakes. The blood of the defeated enemies rushed to the bloodstone. A golden beam hit the top of the mountain, and the aristocrat noticed that a demigod-level expert had arrived in the dungeon, which meant that the academy found out that they were in trouble and sent a teacher after them, and the protagonist tried to understand why they suddenly disturbed an expert of this level, because it could mean that something serious happened in the dungeon, and then said that it didn't matter anyway, because he had to finish the test. A golden glow envelopes the swordsman. The warrior neutralized several creatures with one jerk and said that they were a bunch of animals that did not even know what they were doing. Oliver, the master fencing instructor of the Imperial Academy, a master of the golden sword of the demigod level, puts the sword away against the background of the slain creatures and says that all he has to do is return with the head of a bastard, then His Highness Sandro will be indebted to him. The knight looked at the artifact and thought that it was designed specifically by the Department of Magic to detect those who used blood magic, which meant that he could easily find this boy and finish him off. The man looked to the side with irritation when someone told William that the demigod level existed only for the sake of pretentious sound. The wounded students are walking behind Sal's squad, and the sword master noticed that he saved these guys on the way here, and since there are other students here, it will not be possible to deal with him directly. The boy raised his hands and shouted joyfully that Master Oliver himself had come here to save them. The warrior pathetically raised his sword and thought that there was nothing to be done, because he was a good teacher and everyone loved him, which meant that if he got rid of the villain who was the culprit of the anomaly in the dungeon, then they would even thank him for it. The hero looked ahead, and someone shouted for him to die. Oliver's attack went through the protagonist's bloody energy. The swordsman smugly sheathed his blade and suggested that this child must be happy to have been killed by the blade of a sword master, and someone had noticed that the level of a demigod was the level of a golden sword master, capable of using sword master level attacks. Sal's bloody silhouette approached the frightened mentor and mockingly remarked that all of them from the academy sounded so loud, but in fact they were nothing. The protagonist blocked Oliver's attack, who shouted madly that he was not dead, and then suggested that it was a feature of blood magic, but then added that he would just kill him again. And the hero remembered that the image of the blood demon had trained him to find any poison in the bloodstream, and now, instead of looking for toxins, he did something else. An image of a bloody stream appeared, and the guy explained that he showed her movement through her body. The young man blocks the opponent's attacks. The blade passed by a joyful Sal, who mentally said that he could see the power flowing through his body, so he could predict all his actions in advance, and if he could fully master this technique, then in the future he would even be able to copy the movements and techniques of other people. The shield pushed Oliver away, and a woman's voice shouted that it was a cat's purr. Enraged, William swung and shouted that he was using Imperial Slashing. The swordsman blocked the attack at the last moment. The hero is rapidly approaching a man who realized that Sal was not so easy to kill, and William is fighting with all his might, which means that he will have to take advantage of what he did not want. Oliver let out purple slits around him and mentally wished the protagonist's squad death. The blade sank into the water. Huge and evil creatures look at people. The swordsman stands in the golden stream and mockingly assumes that the students will be grateful to him for arranging such an unusual practice for them. The students struggled to fight off the monsters and realized that Oliver wanted to kill them, and someone shouted that it couldn't be, because he would never do that, to which he received the answer that the mentor used the teleportation scroll and escaped. Fear shackled the young man, who was on his knees and said that he did not want to die, because he still had to earn money, become successful, and start a family. The trembling guy holds the blade and stammering said that he must fight. The Hydra raised its clawed paw. The comrades took fighting stances, and Sal shouted for William to block the monster's blows. The bloodthirsty jaws of the creature began to spew flames of various elements, and the protagonist ordered Adelia and Gloria to protect these losers, because they are their witnesses. The girl raised her hand and shouted that it was a wall, and the redhead said that Adelia's magic would be much more powerful if she stopped giving her such names. The hero barely dodges the attacks and asks William to give him the crystal, to which his comrade warns him that he may fail the trial, and Sal replies that if they die, he will fail it anyway. His partner threw a bag at the protagonist, who realized that it was a catastrophic level monster, so if he used the Shadow Blood Blade technique, then the demon would definitely be able to take control of his body, and then tried to figure out what would happen if he only used skills below the silver level. The hero scattered stones and asked William to divert attention to himself, because he needed a little time. The swordsman blocked the monster's lunge. The creature pushed the guy away strongly. The Hydra towers over the protagonist, and a voice from deep down asks him to be careful. A wounded William stood between Sal and the monster, and shouted that he would use the slashing. The blade bounced off the creature's scales with a clink, and then the guy asked the hero how much more time he needed to collect blood. The fiery projectiles shot towards Sal, who replied that he needed a couple more seconds. Gloria deflected the monster's attacks at the last moment, and said that extermination, a dance of blades. Severe fatigue was reflected on the girl's face, who began to close her eyes. The redhead began to fall down, and Adelia shouted for someone to help her. Gloria landed on a soft, bloody canvas. The protagonist stands against the background of a huge red monster, and tells the beast that its destruction has come. The hero launched a huge slash towards the monster, and shouted that it was a blood flame snake strike. The cut struck the creature. Sal sliced his opponent in two with a clear movement, and assumed that this was the end. Hellfire enveloped the remnants of the monster. Comrades looked at the hero. The trembling guy struggled to his feet. Lewis looked down grimly and said that Sal was a demon using blood magic, a bastard who had betrayed his family, a villain ready to kill his comrades, and William had shouted at him to stop. The disciple furiously raised his sword. The blade plunged into the ground. The student got down on one knee and said that if it were not for the help of the protagonist, he would have already been dead, and then asked to accept his sincere apology for his past stupidity and ignorance. The tired hero stands in front of the squad, which asks to accept their apologies and gratitude. The aristocrat raised her hand and shouted for everyone to look there. A huge swarm of insects is approaching people. Sal used his bloody vision. An unknown beam spreads through the swarm, and the protagonist realizes that there is clearly some kind of mystery behind this rim. The hero used the crimson flash and shouted for Adelia to protect herself and these people. A bloody ray pierced the water surface. Sal stands in front of the bloody heart and realizes that the so-called Melissa swarm is nothing more than a simple tool for collecting life forces, and their real purpose is to resurrect the sorceress Melissa with the help of a magic formation and this heart, and then added that this is black magic again, which means that this is the type of freak who is ready to take everything from others, if only to survive ourselves. Anger filled the eyes of the hero, who released the bloody serpent and ordered him to feast. A green aura enveloped the disciples, who noticed that their strength had returned, and they felt much better. A blue portal appeared out of nowhere, and someone shouted that it was the exit from the dungeon, and the protagonist said that he did not even think that he would accidentally find the exit. Oliver mysteriously stands under a tree and thinks that what happened in this dungeon must remain a mystery, because otherwise, not only will His Highness's plan to merge the academy suffer, but also himself. Light began to penetrate from the crack, and the man mentally said that it could always be worse, and the portal from the dungeon began to open, and then tried to understand who managed to survive. The swordsman drank the potion and thought that he had no right to make a mistake this time, so he wouldn't leave anyone alive. People raised their hands and joyfully shouted that the gate had opened, which meant that they would be able to get out of there very soon, and the girl said that Sal had returned, and then tried to understand if everything was okay with him, to which the hero replied that his strength had been restored, both physical and magical, and he had also found a couple of things at the bottom of the lake. The protagonist showed the stone and said that this crystal vial smelled of poison, that it came from a monster, which meant that they were poisoned with the help of it, to which Adelia said that it is not often that you see vials made of crystals, which means that as soon as they return to the academy, you will need to ask the teacher about it, because he will probably tell you how to find the culprit, to which the hero replied, "That relies on it." William peers thoughtfully into the bloodstone and says that judging by its size, it must be a catastrophic level magic crystal that fell from the five-headed dragon, and then adds that he is sorry that he had to spend the previous crystal, but they cannot be in this poisonous mist, which means that his trial test has failed. The guy approached his friends and told them to take these crystals, because they were crystals that he had managed to collect during his own test, and then wished that Sal would pass this test. The students picked up the bags and shouted for the protagonist to take their stones too, and someone noticed that finally everyone accepted the hero. Oliver mysteriously stands under a tree and realizes that what happened in that dungeon must remain a secret, because otherwise, not only will His Highness's plan to merge the academy suffer, but also himself. Light began to penetrate from the crack, and the man mentally said that it could always be worse, and the portal from the dungeon began to open, and then tried to understand who managed to survive. The swordsman drank the potion and thought that he had no right to make a mistake this time, so he wouldn't leave anyone alive. The happy students came out of the portal, and Oliver tried to understand why they simply couldn't die in that dungeon. A strange feeling pierced the mind of the hero, who looked to the side and realized that there was clearly something bad here. Sal dodged at the last moment with a bloody outburst. Red energy envelopes the blade of the enemy, who wished the protagonist death. The girl looks ahead in horror, and Gloria shouts that they are already rushing to help. The hero soared into the air with the help of fiery wings and said that this time, he would definitely finish Oliver. The opponent quickly broke the distance, and wished Sal to go to hell and die, to which the protagonist replied that he was the only one who would die here. The opponents flew away from each other after a strong blow. The bottle fell out of the hero's pocket. The dean landed between the swordsmen and shouted for them to stop immediately. The old man turned and tried to understand what Oliver was doing, but he thought that this brainless blockhead breaking the rules was only complicating everything, because for the sake of fulfilling the mission of the second prince, the lives of a handful of students were worthless, and the blond man explained that he had come here to eliminate the man who had poisoned the dungeon. Fear enveloped the crowd of students, who stood and said that they had not seen anything, and the aristocrat asked if George had any proof, to which the old man replied positively. The dean unfolded a long parchment, and explained that it was a magic scroll created by the rector of the academy himself. A golden glow enveloped the students, and the old man added that he would detect the smell of poison, and if there was one among them who had used the poison, the scroll would find him. The golden beam approached the crystal vessel. The students are shocked and cannot believe that Sal did it, because he saved them, to which someone suggested that he deliberately used poison to perform his test, and then just took the chance to save them and restore their reputation, and the young man cannot believe that there are such pathetic and shameless people in the world. The hypocritical dean looked to the side and thought that this bunch of miserable scum was so easy to deceive, and then realized that there was nothing to take from those who were destined to be mere pawns in this life. George met Sal's gaze and asked if he had an excuse, to which the protagonist replied that if he himself wanted to accuse a person of something, then there would always be a reason. The old man quickly stretched out his hand forward, and the hero added that if he thought that he would give up without a fight, then he could only dream. Rage filled the eyes of the man who grabbed Sal by the throat, and the protagonist noticed that he was very fast, and then assumed that this was the strength of a true sword master, and then realized that he could not move, but even the magic stopped working after being captured. The madness came from the dean, who raised his blade and began to say that according to Rule 367 of the Academy's charter, the teacher could finish off anyone who attacked him within the walls of the Academy without any consequences, which meant that Chris's heir and student must accept his punishment. A violet beam deflected the man's lunge. The rector and Chris left the portal and asked him to wait for George, because the time for the execution had not yet come. The dean held out the bottle and asked him to look at it, and the scroll he had given him found a mark of corruption on Sal. The long-haired man used an advanced identification technique and realized that it was the royal family's secret poison for killing blood mages, and then added that Chris had really caused him too much trouble with this boy. The man raised his hand and said that it still didn't prove anything, because first they had to put them in a dungeon and then start investigating. The chains bound the suspects, and Albus mentally said that it would be better to lock them up for a while, because this guy would be hit by an unstoppable stream of assassination attempts. The mentors are standing on a golden seal, and the headmaster said that it is time for them to return, because there is no need for students to waste time on such trifles. The students stood in shock and could not understand whether Sal did it or not, because the dean found traces of poison on him with the help of a scroll, but Chris believes the protagonist, and the rector did not finish him off on the spot, and Oliver did not care about their lives. Dim torches shone in the dungeon of the academy. The head sits next to the hero and says that this poison, this special weapon of the royal family against blood mages, according to what he managed to find out, Prince Sandro got it, and the protagonist hissed that he would not leave him behind and kill him. Chris walked to the exit of the cell and asked Sal to stay there and think that no matter how many enemies he killed, there would be no fewer of them. Dirty Oliver closed his eyes and called the hero a jerk, because Mr. Chris's job is to protect the royal family, and he told him to his face that he wanted a prince, to which the protagonist replied that the man did not understand a damn thing, since he still worked for him, because the prince did not give a damn about his life, to which the swordsman added that it was a great honor for him to contribute to His Highness's plan. The guy looked away in shock. There was an image of a hero who remembered that being a shadow of the Cooper family is an honor, and they should be proud of this absolute loyalty. The young man approached the prisoner and asked if it was worth spending his talent, all his efforts on satisfying the desire of someone else, and then suggested that he himself wanted to be treated as expendable whose life could be sold at any time. Despair hit Oliver's temples, sweat dripping down his face as Sal tried to figure out if he cared about something, such as his loved ones, and then added that if he confessed to Director Albus about what he had done in the dungeon, he would help him get rid of the prince's influence. The man grabbed the bars and shouted for the hero to shut up and suggested that the guy wanted him to become just like Sal, namely a rabid beast who betrayed his family and master, to which the protagonist replied that he couldn't wait to see what the master to whom he was so loyal would do to him. The silhouette approached the camera. An unknown person stands and tells Oliver that His Highness has arranged a duel with Sal in the Colosseum, which means this is his last chance. A trembling swordsman was holding a bottle with unknown contents, and the man said that this precious vial of the vine of life would give him a glorious end, and the frightened man said that he would definitely carry out His Highness's order, even at the cost of his life, to which the silhouette replied that it was good that he understood this, since His Highness appreciated his loyalty. Oliver looks at the vial in horror and realizes that after taking the vine of life, he will die, but will he be of any use to glory after death? An image of the silhouettes of a man and a hero appeared, and the swordsman realized that it was all false, and then Oliver asked himself in his mind whether he should sacrifice his life for glory and truth. Clouds floated over the Imperial Colosseum. Sal looks at his hand thoughtfully, and someone shouts that they are starting. The man cast a stern glance to the side. A huge demonic mass is lying on the cart, and the host said that today's duel will be held according to good old customs, where two warriors will clash with each other under the attack of the beast, and then added that whether it is killing their opponent, or defeating the great beast together, the brave survivors will receive a reward and congratulations from His Highness the Second Prince. The creature began to wave its appendages, and the voice noticed that the beast was about to wake up. The tentacles sliced through the man, and the leader shouted that the fight was beginning. Oliver drew his blade and shouted that he had seen the hero wielding his bloody techniques, which meant that if the attack area was large enough, the trick of turning blood wouldn't help him. The protagonist silently parried the enemy's attack. Sal stretched out his hand to the side and asked the stunned man if he had any idea how strong a swordsman with S-class talent was, who had been training hard since he was 4 years old. The monster began to pull its appendages towards the guy. The hero used a silent blade, a crash, and thought that now that he was able to recover, he would try Chris's attack at 10 meters, and then shouted to Oliver that he had regained his strength, and now he was no match for him. The prince watches the fight and cannot understand why Oliver has not used the potion yet, and then asks to bring grace to him. Oliver's mother, who was the second prince's cook, lowered her head. The man turned around and realized with horror that if he lost, then they would do something terrible to his mother. The swordsman looked at the bottle. Oliver emptied the contents and realized that he had no right to do so. A monstrous power overwhelmed the swordsman. The fierce opponent charged and shouted for Sal to die for his mother. The opponents crossed blades, and the man asked the protagonist to save his mother from the hands of the second prince, and in return, he would help him finish off the beast, and the hero tried to understand what he was going to do. Oliver threw out the protagonist and shouted that only if he died, his mother would be able to see tomorrow. The guy is rapidly approaching the monster. Desperate Oliver looked up and began to beg the hero. Power overwhelmed the swordsman's body, who swung and shouted that it was a mining technique, a vortex of flaming blade. Oliver pierced the creature's body with his blade and shouted for it to die. A huge cloud of dust rose after the impact. The woman bent down and began to desperately call for her son, and the prince haughtily said that it was a waste of time, because he could not even cope with such a trifle. Tears run down the woman's face. An injured Oliver is on his knees and hopes that his death can calm the wrath of his highness, and Sam will see that he has paid for his sins and is saving his mother. The activated stone begins to exude sparks of magic, the core of hellish life. The stone began to drain the strength from Oliver in an instant. The opponent began to ask the opponent to save his mother in pain. He asked that the guy worked for the second prince because of his mother. The stone entered the opponent's chest halfway. In the place where the stone was, the protagonist's sword came next, who said that if Oliver died, they would not help him and save someone else. The blade pierced the stone with Sal's words to take care of the family himself, and what he owed, blood magic, rebirth of blood and flesh. The weapon went through the applicant. After the battle, the protagonist recovered with a healing spell and whispered that the blood of the hellish manhole could quickly neutralize the negative effects of the vine of life, so the guy should not worry, teacher Chris would take him. As he moved, Sel stood in front of Prince Sandro, who said that he didn't think that blood magic was so powerful that it could defeat both a beast and a demigod swordsman at the same time. Crossing his arms, the prince continued to say that the victor could ask for his reward, anything, riches, or maybe he would ask forgiveness for the evil he had done. The blonde replied that he only needed a maid. The woman raised her head at the main character. Sandro asked in surprise that he wanted only one servant, and added that maybe the guy wanted to take revenge on Oliver's family. A soldier standing behind the woman forced the maid to bow, and the prince continued to say that of course, Sel was a true blood mage. Smiling, His Majesty said that bloodlust had completely consumed the hero, and that the protagonist could join the kingdom and become its faithful blade. Sel asked if it was true that His Majesty had such a fickle attitude towards servants, and then lowered his head to the woman and said that Oliver had given his life for her, following orders, and then his rival's family had been kicked out into the cold. Sandro approached the blonde. Coming close to the hero, the prince said that it was a pity that the warrior fell, and the main character asked what would happen if he did not join the kingdom. Pointing his hand at the protagonist, His Majesty replied that in this case, blood mages are not liked in the Empire, so only people with power can protect him, and that the guy must become his sword, otherwise, he will be expelled from the academy for attempting to assassinate the prince. Immediately after the prince's words, Louis rushed to attack, saying that as a hero, he could speak to His Majesty like that. Sel stopped the opponent's attack. The door swung open, letting the light into the hall. Chris and Oliver ran into the room, followed by the guards shouting that it was a murderer and that they needed to save His Majesty. Oliver hugged his sobbing mother, who said how glad she was to see him alive, and Louis screamed from what he saw that as a guy he could be alive, wishing him to go to hell. Sel threw his opponent aside and replied that only Louis would go to hell. The protagonist flew past the attacking knights with a flash, a bloody flash. The blonde man put his sword to Sandra's throat, saying that power was useless in this situation. The prince turned to Chris and said that the man was the head of the royal guard and the supreme assassin of the royal family, and asked him that he had also decided to become a traitor. The brunette took out his weapon. In one fell swoop, Chris's sword blew the head off the guard's shoulders. Laying down his weapon back, the man said that he was loyal only to His Majesty. Taking 3 vials out of his pocket, Chris explained that these were vials with royal poison that were found in Melissa's dungeon and also on Oliver's body. The brunette said that the head of the guard was obliged to find out where they came from. Chris thought to himself that it was good that Angela's daughter had already been saved by Sal, so Sandro would not be able to manipulate as it was with Oliver. Sandro turned away and thought that if Chris continued, he would get to the bottom of it, in which case, His Majesty would put the prince under house arrest, and added that there would be an exchange of new students soon. If the prince was not on it, the blonde continued, then the elder brother would take this opportunity. Crossing his arms over his chest, Sandro replied that the vials were a gift from Moran, and he had no idea how Oliver got them. Sal asked what the prince wanted to say, that what happened was the work of Moran and Oliver, and that His Majesty had nothing to do with it. Turning towards the protagonist, the prince replied that of course he was not involved in this case, and would make sure that Moran got what he deserved, that he would then report everything to Chris, and shouted that Moran should be called here. Sal thought to himself from what he heard that Sandro was definitely behind all this, manipulating people and controlling them at the expense of his status. But now it is impossible to harm the prince, since Chris's teacher will have trouble, and he realized that first he had to finish with Moran, and then tie Sandra's hands. Moran ran into the room and asked if His Majesty was looking for him. A blood-red dragon jumped out at Moran abruptly, saying that it was unknown that the man would die. The shield repelled the attack, and the unknown person added that he did not expect that the protagonist would dare to attack Sandra, especially in the middle of the day. Alan entered the room and said that according to the sacred laws of the Empire, Moran was a baron. Raising his head, the brunette added that this meant that even if Sal killed Moran, he would have to apologize to the Cooper family and pay compensation. Raising his hand, Alan was surprised that the protagonist was still alive, and asked the boy that Moran, being a baron, and being one, had not broken any laws. The brunette bowed to the prince and greeted him, saying that the Cupel family apologized for the protagonist's poor upbringing, and that he raised his hand against the prince. Sandro replied that such a mad dog should be kept behind bars. Alan said that his interlocutor should not worry about this, and that he would take this point into account. Turning around, the brunette said that he hadn't seen Sal for a long time, and asked if he was ready to return to his cage. Two people entered the hall. A dark-haired man said that the hero surprised him today with his reaction. Chris remembered how the guy in white gloves, raising his hand during the dialogue, poured mud on the hero. The head of the guard added that he was disgusted to listen, and the hero was not angry. Several members of the royal family, their mouths open, looked forward at something that surprised them. The protagonist hit the offender. He replied to Chris that why would he be angry? He had already dealt with a guy from the Cooper family more than once. The head of the Knights added that Alan is protected by the Oaths of Shadows, so he will not die. A girl in a purple dress holds Alan in her arms. Chris explains that only the shadows of the Cooper family will suffer. The man lies in a pool of blood. Alan's mother and his father, approaching their son, are trying to calm him down. Chris said that his mother would not leave her son alone. She and the head of the family are already here. Second, Prince Sandro with a sinister smile pulls the red strings that are tied to his words. The head of the guard said that Prince Sandro has been instructed to hold an exchange meeting for new students of the academy. He must have invited the heads of all 7 great families to increase his influence and strength. 2 soldiers, raising their swords, shout after the protagonist that Sal is a pathetic poisoner and will be crushed in the name of light. Another swordsman said that the hero should not let himself be fooled. You need to tear off the false mask from his face. The white-haired guy said that you should not shout like that. The hero, parrying his opponent's sword, said that there would be many talented S-level warriors at the exchange meeting, who surpassed the guards at times over, and they were also waiting to fight him. Having defeated 2 fighters with 1 blow, the hero said that he had no time for a duel. Chris, smiling, said that the boy had grown up. The head of the royal guard, along with a guy in a shirt, walking between 2 trees, said that he had arranged for the protagonist to meet with the director Albus. He was extremely interested in blood magic and wanted to learn it. He added that maybe the director would help him learn something new. A raven with sparkling eyes flies into a huge hall, the training hall of the Imperial Academy. Albus, facing Sal, told him to use his strongest move. Sal replied that it would all end badly. The headmaster, raising his hand, used a spell with a blue aura. He added that if the main character didn't respect old people, then he would start first. A huge blue hand appeared from the portal behind Sal. Albus struck with his spell. The hero thought that the headmaster had cast the summoning spell without words. Sal, dodging the attack, concluded that he was able to defend himself with blood magic. This blow was comparable in power to the attack of a sword master. A huge golem appeared behind the headmaster. It was an Albus training dummy. The director explained that although he was no longer in his best shape, he could still handle the golden sword master. Sal frowned and replied that he wouldn't hold back either. Enveloping the stone giant with tongues of red magic, the guy used the blood storm skill. Albus, bringing his hand to his chin, noted that the scope of the ability was not bad, but it would be better to try to concentrate more power in one blow. Soaring upwards with the help of blood magic, he used the blood flame skill. The headmaster, opening his mouth, said that Sal had increased his strength with his own blood. Swinging his sword, the white-haired guy said that he was using the mad snake charge. Albus noticed that the hero was too forgetful. The blood demon would not miss the opportunity to devour his master. A huge blood demon appeared behind Sal. The director explained that the demon feeds on the life force of other creatures, and Sal only strengthens it by burning his own blood. The old man added that Sal constantly used high-level techniques, burning a lot of blood, which is why the demon was able to gain control over him. The demon, looking at the teacher, told him to let him go. He would finish them all off. The director replied that the demon was even conscious, and this voice was exactly like that of Brad Cooper Jr. Chris, entering the training room, objected that it was no longer possible to continue the fight. The blood monster was chained. Albus said that he still had strength, and in order to protect Sal from the demon, he needed to seize the right moment and imprison the monster in chains. The master opened his mouth and said that he forbade Sal from using blood magic until he learned to control the blood demon. Sal looked ahead and replied with displeasure in his voice that the exchange meeting was about to begin, and he couldn't use his strongest techniques. Chris, sitting down next to him, explained that this was why he needed to possess the demon as soon as possible. The essence of blood magic was to control and manipulate blood. He would give Sal a special training course. Albus's long hair fluttered in the air. He said that the hero was already used to relying on bloody swordsmanship. He didn't even notice how he got out of control. Sal stands in the fighting room with the blood monster that is reflected in the floor of the hall. The demon said that the troops led by the first and second generations of the Cooper Lords were invincible, and then they all died in one night. Sal remembered how he had read the books from the shelf of the closet. He wondered if the bloody swordsmanship had gone into a rage, which explained why there was no mention of this event in the books of the family library. Albus is standing on a field of bloody crosses. He said that there are many friends studying in their academy, which the hero must take care of, and if he does not want his friends to die at his hand, he must control himself. The old man leaves the room. Chris said that they will immediately begin a special training of blood magic. Ravens fly out into the street through the doorway, the head of the guard saying that the fewer people know about this secret training, the better. Chris turned. The crow blushed like a man. A naked cell stands near a vat of red liquid. Chris, standing near the fence of the academy, noticed that there were a lot of birds in the forest. Soon it would become very lively. The crow turned into a girl with 2 pigtails, who said that it was just a therapeutic bath. The girl lightly slapped herself on the cheeks. She said that all the Lord is a drunkard, he did it on purpose. The girl added that, however, the headmaster forbade Sal to use blood magic, which means she would definitely be able to kill the hero at the student exchange meeting. Luna Forest is a student with the S-level talent of the Forest family, one of the 7 great families. The rays of the bright sun break through the clouds, and the host of the competition says that this is one of the few events in the capital of St. Gort that can gather a whole stadium, where the audience will be able to personally not only see talented students. He pulls his hand aside and goes on to say that viewers can also meet the heads of the empire's largest families. Representatives of the clans sit in chairs, and the man continues to call out their names, and that it is His Royal Highness, Prince Sandro, the lords of noble families, as well as teachers and students of the Imperial Academy, and that today everyone has gathered to see the new talents and potential of the first years. The young man raised his hand in a gesture of greeting, and the host said that it was necessary to thank His Highness Sandro for organizing this meeting, and that the winner of the competition would receive not only the highest priority of studying at the academy, but also the gratitude of His Highness, and any wish. Sal looks thoughtfully ahead and thinks that the second prince is increasingly brazenly trying to win the love of those around him. The man looks ahead and announces that the competition is divided into 2 parts: qualification and tournament, and that in the first round worthy students will be selected who will then participate in the tournament itself, and continues that they will fight in the one-on-one arena until there is only one winner, and that the qualifying round will be held according to the old rules. 8 students. Those who can cut off the head of the Hydra and hold out with it until the end of the battle will qualify for the tournament. The Hydra opens its mouths. It is an immortal monster. The participants of the competition rush forward from their seats. The monster with glowing eyes furiously bares its fangs. The man says that how quickly the first head of the Hydra fell off his shoulders, and that it looks like natural magic, which is not taught in the academy, and asks who did it. The girl throws the crossbow up victoriously, and the young man says that at such a young age, already possessing the embodiment of a raven and the creation of magic arrows at the same time is definitely an S-level talent, and adds that the newcomer from the Forest family is very good. Feathers fly into the air, and the guy reflects that there are many hidden talents among the new first-year students. The spiked axe flies swiftly at the enemy. Blood splatters from the monster's head, and the protagonist wonders to himself that someone dared to steal loot from the Forest family. The chain cuts through the air, and Saladin thanks his crow's sister for a ticket to the tournament. The participant of the competition victoriously raises the head of the monster and declares that he will gladly accept it. Raven rises above the arena and asks what the guy wanted to die, and Sal wonders who is stronger, the Forest family, the kings of the jungle, or the Delanco, the lords of the storm. The guy looks menacingly at his opponent and asks that this is cute, and that she really hoped to break through his defense with her attack. The young man confidently steps forward and tells the girl to be careful, otherwise she will lose a lot of feathers and go bald, and the protagonist observes that, as expected from the Delanco family, they are famous for their impenetrable defense. The Hydra lowers its head with its mouth open, and the host of the competition says that Saladin Delanco is in first place, and that he got the head of the Hydra and goes to the next round of the competition, and the audience chants that it's cool and he won so quickly, and the main character continues his observations that this monster is much stronger than the dragon that was set on them in the dungeon. And it's a good thing that he is under the magic of suppression, otherwise they would have a hard time. The Hydra turned its head, grinning, and Gloria asked that she had not expected an attack from behind and ordered her to turn around. She stands in the center of the magical flashes and declares that she will not allow these northern barbarians to underestimate the warriors of their empire. And the guy thinks that this is a member of the Isaac family, and that it is not for nothing that in a past life they became the right hand of the emperor. William swiftly approaches the enemy and shouts that this is the territory of the Imperial Academy, and that they will show their strength to everyone. The monster slowly approaches the blonde girl from behind, and the protagonist yells at her to be careful and tells the monster to leave her behind. The young lady turns back with a frightened face. The severed head of the Hydra falls at her feet, and she admires how strong Sal is to defeat the enemy with a single sword blow, and he thinks that the Hydra's level has been suppressed to the very bottom, and that it seems that the Academy does not want to lose in the selection stage. The warrior raises the head of the monster high and declares that he also got such a trophy, and the main character thinks that this is great, and they need another head, and their squad will be able to go to the next stage. The Hydra's head is chained, and the guy thinks that it is rare to find such a weakened monster, and that in addition to the head, he must take something else with him. The young man quickly approaches the enraged monster and orders Adelia, Gloria and William to go to the next stage, and he wants to practice a little with this creature. The protagonist with a fiery sword attacks the enemy and thinks that he cannot use blood magic, but is still strong enough to deal with it with a single sword. The monster spews an energy ball of magic from its mouth, and Sal thinks that as for its magical, fiery attack, he will use it, and that the enemy will kill himself. He raises a fiery sword over the monster's head. The guy stands in a fighting stance in front of the enemy and decides that now that her regeneration has been weakened by her own strongest attack, she needs to act immediately. He swiftly attacks the Hydra and thinks that left with only one head, it will spend all its strength repairing the severed body parts. The enemy's head flies up, and the protagonist continues to think that at this moment the Hydra will be the weakest. The young man's weapon throws up a magical stream, and he decides that if he resonates with the blood magic that Chris taught him, then he will deal the Hydra the final blow, and will be able to get its gift of regeneration. The fire magic of the sword is unleashed on the Hydra. The main character's hands are entangled in magic ribbons. Alan raises his hand and tells Sal that he caused a massacre in an attempt to cut off the last head of the monster, and missed his chance to get into the tournament. He squints his eyes and asks why the guy doesn't fall to his knees and beg him, and what can he reward him with a passage further. The main character straightened his shoulders and said that he would never kneel, and added that he had no conscience at all. The members of the Cooper clan are caught in magical bonds, and Alan says that if he doesn't care about entering the tournament, then maybe his comrades mean nothing to him. The protagonist resolutely moves his weapon aside and calls out to Alan. The Hydra breaks the shackles around its neck. Sal throws his weapon at the reviving monster with lightning speed and says that she is about to die. The prince sitting on the throne bowed his head slightly and said that the restraint had been removed from the Hydra, and that the Cooper bastard was in such a hurry to die, and added that if there were a couple of such monsters in the arena, it would be much more spectacular. Alan looks at Sal approaching and declares that today he will take revenge on him for all the humiliation he brought him as a child, and that he will wash away this shame with blood. Lisa curls her hair. The monster towers behind the protagonist, and Alan says that he brought with him the most fanged dog of the Sand family. A girl with green eyes surrounds herself with magical dark streams. The protagonist continues to reflect that Lisa uses the magic of dark bonds, which weakens and sucks the life out of her goal, and that fighting her directly is a waste of energy, and that because of Alan, he did not have time to cut off the last head of the Hydra in time, which is why she managed to fully regain her powers. A young man attacks an enraged monster. The Hydra spews purple flames from its mouth, and he thinks that in this case he will allow him to enjoy all the power of the freed Hydra, and Alan asks that he is an idiot, and that he thinks that destroying Lisa's hair can harm her. The girl looks with horror at the black curls developing around her. She stretches out her hands to her head. Black dogs with glowing eyes run in different directions, and the protagonist thinks that it is interesting that she was able to absorb and transform the flames of the Hydra, and that using the power of the Hydra so brazenly will only anger him, and that she will definitely not leave the offender alone after such a provocation. The young man soars up. The guy is holding the severed head of a monster in his hands, and the main character thinks that the Hydra has just been released. There is very little time left before the eruption of its power, and that it is necessary to get rid of Alan as soon as possible. The dogs rush forward, and Lisa warns Master Alan to be careful. Red and white magic streams destroy the enemy. The protagonist quickly approaches the enemy, and says why these half-dead dogs should stop him from killing Alan. The opponent deftly dodges Sal's attack, and he sees that this is another rescue trick, and that how difficult it is to finish him off. This is a redirection of damage. The girl falls on her back, and William asks if the main character needs their help. The guy leans towards Lisa, and the protagonist orders them to get out of here as soon as possible and take the girl with them. The armored warrior hugs Lisa and hisses that he is in pain, and the host announces that Gloria Isaac is in third place, and that she is congratulated for passing to the next stage, and continues that the fourth place is taken by an unknown fighter, and he is also congratulated for passing to the next stage. The enraged girl sinks her teeth into the young man's hand, and he shouts at her that he should stop biting. Didn't she realize that Sal doesn't want to kill her? And the host says that William takes sixth place and congratulates him on it. A brunette with distraught eyes holds the guy's hand, and he asks her not to stay here to take revenge on Alan. She looks at the young man with disbelief and asks that such a freak is worth risking his life for him. William looks at Lisa with concern in his eyes and promises that when they grow up and become stronger, they will be able to protect themselves. The girl lowered her sad eyes, and the guy continued that she personally passed the test and deserved her place in the tournament, and that he hopes that in the next stage they can fight each other fairly. And the man says that the seventh place is taken by Lisa Sana, and she is congratulated on this. The monster spews purple clouds from its mouth, and the guy says what kind of creature he is, and how dare this dog betray him. The Hydra bared its jaws, and the protagonist said that no one could protect Alan anymore, and asked if he was ready to die. The young man raises his hand and asks the young man that he wants to kill him and adds that he is sorry, but he will not be able to do it today, and continues that he will be the last fighter to go to the next stage of the competition, and Sal will become food for the Hydra. The young man takes his dream aside. The Hydra's head flies off its neck. The young man tilts his head down and asks if this is true, and continues that he would not kill the Hydra so quickly, but thanks to Alan, he managed to exhaust the monster well. The protagonist sits on the head of the monster and declares that now that it has reached the peak of its weakness, he will be able to complete the ritual. The protagonist stands in a circle of red magic streams and says that his teacher Chris told him about a ritual of blood magic, described in ancient tomes, that when the blood of the monster is mixed together with the life stream of the owner, a common bond is formed between them. An S-class ability is obtained, Rapid Regeneration. It allows you to restore physical damage at lightning speed, while avoiding any negative effects of this attack. The young man looks intently at his hand and says that at this moment a person can synchronize the flow of blood and not only subdue the will of the monster, but also take possession of its special abilities. Alan looks at his palm in disbelief. He squeezes his shoulder in pain and shouts that how dare Sal cut off his arm, and Sal replies that he is sorry that he does not have the opportunity to repair it this time. The protagonist points the finger at Alan with contempt and says that as someone to whom the shadows have taken their oath, he has never thought about what it would be like to be a shadow himself. The guy looks at the protagonist with hatred and yells that what is the matter. It is not surprising that he dared to live his miserable life for so long, and that he thinks that such revenge will work, and after all the pain that he will cause him will be transferred to countless innocent shadows. The protagonist raises his sword and declares that after receiving the regeneration of the Hydra, weak attacks will not only do no harm to him, but he will not even feel them, and continues, because unlike Alan, he experiences all the pain from them in full. The guy's body is pierced by magical currents. Alan says that Sal is just gone crazy, and asks him to let him go, and that he can just kill him. The main character holds the head of the monster in his hand and says that he will not allow Alan to die so easily, and that he wants him to continue to live in agony and fear, not even knowing when his body will be pierced by this pain again, and remember that this is how he once lived. The guy turned his gaze to the head of the monster, and the host finished that the 8th place was taken by Sal Cooper and went to the next stage. Saladin threw his axe over his shoulder and said that such a huge firebrand had probably never been cut off before, and that this young man was strong. The protagonist shifted his gaze to the confident opponent and thought that he was the first in the Delanco family to receive a rank increase. In addition to the skills of absolute defense, according to rumors, he also has a secret technique for controlling dragons, and the guy said that he was looking forward to the battle with the young man, and the host announced that the first round of the tournament would be held tomorrow, and that Saladin Delanco and Sal Cooper would face each other in the first match. Prince Sandro raised his hand over the goblet, and the main character thought that in the very first fight he was put against such a strong opponent as Saladin Delanco, that the second prince clearly wanted him dead. The protagonist looked up and thought that now was the perfect time to fight the opponent, and that after all, if he wanted to win the tournament, then the best way to deal with the strongest was to do it earlier. The yellow-haired warrior furiously throws his axe at the enemy and exclaims that he hopes Sal will like his axe, and Sal admires the power and strength of the enemy, and thinks that such an attack will be difficult to block. The guy is desperately brandishing his weapon. The protagonist dodges the attack, and the young man demands that he do not dare to dodge and fight him. He manages to put his foot on the opponent's axe. Sal puts a ring on his finger and says that he is the coward, and that House Delanco is known in ancient times as the Warriors of the Sea. The axe crashed into the ground from a powerful blow, and the main character asks that it turns out that real men should hide from enemies at a distance and shoot at them from cannons. The opponent threw his hand forward with fury and said that the opponent should repeat what he had just said. The young man grabbed his opponent's fist and asked why he had so much strength for such a short fellow. The opponent shook his hand from side to side and exclaimed that Sal was cunning, and that he wanted to make him lose his temper and seize the right moment, and that he would not succeed. The guy put out his hands to protect himself from the axes flying at him. He raised his head in horror, surrounded by streams of purple mana, and the protagonist thought that he did not expect that Saladin's defenses would be so impenetrable, and that even the erosion of the Hydra combined with the bloody spikes did not damage him. The young man flew into the air with a weapon in his hands and asked why the protagonist was so nervous, and that he would now pay for his words, and Sal replied that he was ready to attack. The protagonist shifted his gaze to his opponent and summoned blood magic and general communication to make them freeze. The enemy, with anger and hatred, raised his weapon over the young man and realized what he had done, and he replied that in war all means are good. He confidently deflected the blow of the axe and said that when you go into a rage, you need to keep your sanity, otherwise such a cunning person as he will be able to catch him in a blood connection. The protagonist swung his sword and demanded that the enemy go away from here. Saladin flies upside down. The gray-blue sky is pierced by magical flows. A dragon's tail appears, a flying demon, an A-class monster, an elite dragon that can use the magical elements of ice and lightning. A huge monster with glowing eyes flies up to the young man, and the protagonist thinks that a flying beast with a cold-blooded character, which relies on agility instead of strength, is not very suitable for a fierce opponent. The dragon releases icy flames from its mouth at the guy flying down. The enemy sits astride the enraged monster and says that Sal forced him to summon Thor, and it's a pity that this is the end of it for him. The head of the royal guard folded his arms over his chest and said that according to the rules of the arena, summoned creatures cannot take part in the tournament, and this is unfair to the young man. And the man said that the rules are rules, and that, however, Saladin is an exception, since he is a dragon rider, and that if the jury members agree with him, then so be it. Sal is also allowed to summon creatures. The monster spews ice flames, and the guy says that he will watch the protagonist dodge it. The main character finds himself in a ring of icy flames and thinks that if he continues to spend his energy repelling such attacks, then it will definitely not end well for him, and that he needs to somehow shorten the distance. The opponent throws up his hand with hatred and anger, and declares that the young man is lucky, and that today he will show him the most powerful attack of the dragon rider. The prince shifted his cunning gaze to the man and said that Saladin was indeed the most talented of the warriors of the Delanco family, and the man said that he was grateful to him for the compliment, and that his son was the pride of the family, and continued that as the only child of the Delanco family, that for the first time in many centuries he was able to make a pact with the dragon. He was able to communicate with a flying demon, to harness the power of the heavens themselves together, and unleash the full force of thunder on his enemies, and ended up leading House Delanco and the dragons to a great future. The young man shifts his evil gaze to the protagonist, and declares that it is a great honor for him to die from the fury of the storm itself. The red dragon spread his wings, and Sal said that his opponent was rejoicing early. The man looked up in surprise and asked that it was a demon dragon, and that they weren't extinct. The young guy turned his frightened gaze to his opponent. The protagonist put his hand on his belt and thought that today the dragon had obtained his lightning magic, and in the future, his power would become immeasurable. Red magical streams enveloped the blue mana, and the young man asked the monster to show him his abilities, and Saladin says that this is impossible, and that this simply cannot be. A flash of thunder erupts from under the dragon's paw. The protagonist is enveloped in the power of lightning, which allows him to travel a short distance, and Sal declares that he must win this battle. A powerful dragon towers behind Sal. Soladina is engulfed in blue flames. The protagonist turns his head and says that the judge can now announce it. A dragon soars over the arena, and people say what it is like to shine in the rays of glory, and that this is a reward that no shadow has ever been honored with. The man with a hostile face spread his arms to the sides and growled that Sal was a pathetic thief who had stolen the power and treasure of the Delanco family. The axe flies in the air. The man bows angrily and says that the guy should give him back along with the demonic dragon. The beast intercepts the flying axe. The protagonist crossed his arms over his chest and asked why he was a dragon. The main character quickly bends down and says that today he will show the fearless old man the simple truth of the world. A stream of fire erupted from the mouth of the huge dragon. In the world of swords and magic, dragon riders flying high in the sky are the most dangerous and powerful opponents. The king with the crown on his head watched over the two guys for the sake of the balance of power among the noble families. The old king destroyed all the demonic dragons. The last clutch of eggs was left trapped inside the Crystal City, and the key to it was divided between the Cooper and Isaac families. The old man with gray hair and beard swung his hand at the dragon with a clenched fist and realized that the demonic dragons were not extinct, and exclaimed that it was even excellent. However, it was a pity that he recognized the vile crook as the master, and noted to himself that dragons are the most loyal creatures in the world, and if he chose his master, he would never betray him again, if the rider dies. Or if you try to forcibly separate them, it will only drive the dragon to suicide. He watched his movements carefully and wondered where the guy got this dragon from. He had brothers or sisters, and added to himself that if their Delanco family could get their hands on this dragon, they would definitely become the strongest of the 7 great houses. The main character looked at him and said that this was the last demonic dragon in the whole world. The rest of the eggs were ordered to be destroyed. The elder wondered who gave such an order. The guy was holding on to the dragon's body. He bent down to the old man and replied that the one who least wanted to see the Delanco family at the top of the food chain. Sometimes, absolute loyalty did not always guarantee his safety. He clarified that this was the second prince. But why would he need it? An image appeared with the table of the tournament in the playoff format. He noticed that it was much easier to control the dragon if his wings and fangs were broken off. The protagonist of the dragon's tears and warned William that his next opponent is the heiress of the Forest family of Forest. They mainly use traps to effectively hunt their prey. The bear got entangled in the rope. William held his sword in his right hand, who added that he had better close the distance as quickly as possible and use his most powerful techniques to deal with it as quickly as possible. Otherwise he would quickly be stuffed with crossbow bolts. Crossbow shells flew in his direction. A huge flow of energy hit his barrier. Sal noted that he did not even expect that the moon would be able to set up defenses so quickly. Despite the enormous strength, William's attacks are easy to predict, so he should now break out of the tangling vine while the moon attacks with the crossbow, and then, taking advantage of the moment after the attack, try to approach it again. The girl clutched the handle of a crossbow in her left hand. The girl's opponent spread his hands in different directions. The main character realized that William decided to take the blow, thanks to which, the resulting blast wave tore apart the magical vines, although it still hits endurance very hard. A projectile of the moon flashed in front of his face. He jumped with his sword at his opponent. The girl instantly dodged his attack. He swung his sword to attack. His sword was shrouded in green energy. The guy said to himself that if he didn't finish everything right here and now, then his life would be in great danger. He swung his blade with all his might. The ashen-haired man crossed his arms over his chest and noticed that he had failed. A huge crater formed in front of the participant in the fight. The girl put a knife to his neck and exclaimed that only the skill of fencing and nothing more. He wondered in bewilderment when she had time why he could not move. The moon threw up her arms in different directions. The protagonist opened his eyes wide and realized that something was clearly wrong with him. Perhaps it was due to the fact that he spent a lot of energy during the last battle. Mushrooms grew on the vines. He assumed that this was due to the action of hallucinogenic plants. It seemed that the moon at the very beginning of the battle imprisoned their seeds inside the entangled vine, floating poisonous caps. A magical hallucinogenic A-class mushroom, which highlights special spores that cause hallucinations and insanity in their victims. William clutched the handle of the ball in his right hand. He raised his hands above himself. The main character reasoned that as soon as he tore apart the vines that entwined him, the spores of these mushrooms began to spread in the air around him. During his attack, given the resulting explosion, he managed to breathe in them and fall under their influence. The guy with gray hair was leaning on his sword. He clarified to himself that this was her trump card, and decided to avenge William in the battle with her. Luna kicked the guy out of the arena. The commentator reported that William was leaving the arena, and Luna was the winner in this round. Sal squeezed his left hand in anger, and exclaimed what she wanted to do to him. The guy's body was grabbed by black tentacles. Lisa whispered to save him. He wondered when they managed to become so friends, caught him even faster than him, and strangely, she just saved his life, and she herself stays away. The black-haired girl put her hands to her chest. Andrea knelt in front of William's body and noted that Lady Luna had been too cruel to him, and that there were still spores of those hallucinogenic mushrooms in his body, and she couldn't take the effects of them off him. The protagonist turned to the girl standing behind him, and realized that he had an idea. He asked her to lightly hit William with black magic. He needed to wake up as soon as possible. An image of purple lightning appeared. He was glad that he woke up, and asked him not to forget to thank Lisa for this. William looked at the girl and thanked her for saving her. She covered her face with her hands in embarrassment. A drop of sweat slid down his cheek. He asked that she had just seen him and immediately ran away. Andrea put her right thumb to her chin and reasoned that Lisa's magic had collided with her own inside William's body. This allowed her to see some of her own memories. And it turned out that she couldn't protect Alan, and also saved William's life. She was afraid that the mother of this bastard would definitely punish her for it. Sal calmed her down, noting that Lisa is a participant in the tournament, and Madame Cooper is not so crazy as to punish her right during the competition. Hera held the whip in her right hand and scolded the girl that she was a useless trinket, unable to even protect her master, and she still wanted to show herself in the arena. Lisa was sitting tied up with ropes on the floor. She added why she, a brainless dog, decided that she was worthy of it. The girl opened her eyes wide and her mouth wide. Famous for its black sorcery, the Sanaa clan annually gathered orphans and street boys from all over the world to bring them to the dark temple of their family. She held the dog by the leash. Sanaa's black magic feeds on the deepest human suffering and despair, systematically destroying their psychological resilience, the clan burning their humanity to ashes. The girl spread her arms in different directions. Only those few who miraculously survive in this torment are honored to bear the brand of San, turning into ruthless instruments of death. Blood flowed from her wounds. Madame Cooper immediately asked what she had forgotten, what she had been taught. She pulled on her whip and added that her body, soul, and every drop of blood belonged to her master, and since she had failed to protect her master, let her no longer need this hand. Lisa gritted her teeth in pain and asked her for forgiveness. She opened her eyes and noted that she was unworthy, unable to protect young Master Alan. The girl bowed her head at Hera's feet. A red-hot sword flew towards the woman. Someone's scream ordered her to stop. A whip slipped from her hand. Enraged, Sal ran into the room and exclaimed that this was the Imperial Academy, not its torture fiefdom. She stretched out her hand and said that he had come very inopportunely, although it was even better, now she would personally break his neck. A green haze escaped from her ring. She concluded that he would be like this dog, living in the shackles of black magic worse than death, humiliatingly begging at her feet. The girl opened her mouth from suffocation. The main character looked at the woman and replied that it was funny how the shadow oath imposed by the Coopers now binds him to Alan. He has become his shadow. Hera stood opposite and shouted that he was a cursed bastard. How dare he talk to his master like that? He looked at Lisa and hoped that she would live a long time, because poor Alan would experience all her pains twice. She closed her eyes and asked her master to punish her. The protagonist held out his hand in front of him and said that they were bloodthirsty executioners who played with human lives. Andera said that if he was aware of the consequences, attacking the nobleman would deprive them of the second prince's support and the right to advance. She waved her staff and added that she had seen Lisa's memories. In order to free her, she needed to awaken the warmest moments of her past. The blonde guy leaned over to the girl and asked if she could hear him. She had a duel. If she won, stay in the academy. William smiled slightly at her and said that he finally had a chance to meet her face to face and honestly find out who was stronger. Lisa opened her eyes slightly. She grabbed the magic collar, which added that if they managed to get out of this dungeon today, she would be free from her shackles forever. The woman put out her hand and shouted how she, an insignificant animal, dared even to think of freedom. It would make her soul experience torments that she did not even dare to imagine. She held on to the collar with her hands and realized that she could not die here. Hera was thrown aside by the shockwave. Lisa ran out the door and reminded herself that she had made a promise. She had no right to lose her life in this place. She closed her eyes in exhaustion and muttered that she must not give up, she must not die. William caught her in his arms and happily stated that he was so afraid that something terrible would happen to her. She clarified how he ended up here. Wasn't the rector supposed to treat him? The woman stood on all fours on the floor and shouted that they didn't dare to talk like that. Even if Lisa was freed from black magic, she was still the property of the Sand Clan. Albus looked at her and replied that she was a participant in the tournament, not the private property of any house. Hera stood in front of her and reminded her that unfortunately, after the end of the rookie tournament, the academy would no longer be able to defend her. He gave her a displeased look and retorted that if she became his apprentice, the Sana clan would be willing to quarrel with the Cooper family for it. She walked away from them and noted that it was very kind of him. He replied that it was William who insisted. Sometimes the teacher has to fulfill the requests of his students. She thought that it was interesting how William managed to influence the rector. It seemed that he was very attached to Lisa. The rector informed the young man that he trusted him to take care of Lisa. Alan held Lisa in his arms and did not understand why he was the one. Because it would be so convenient. Why not Andrea? She leaned against his chest. The girl asked him to be quiet, because she was sleeping. Sal put his hand on Oliver's shoulder and noted that he had done a great job, because thanks to him they learned about the existence of this secret dungeon, and they were able to save Lisa. He bowed to him and told him that before his arrival, the rector had already announced on Lisa's behalf the refusal to participate in the second round. The Sana clan officially recognized that Andrea and Molly automatically went further. He put his fingers on his chin and added that in the other group there would be a duel between Gloria and a mysterious knight. He had smashed Gloria with lightning speed without a scratch, using techniques that even he, the old teacher, had failed to recognize. The girl on her knees handed the man a braid. The black-haired man stuck out the index finger of his right hand and said that now it was his turn to enter the arena. If he was late, the prince would deprive him of the right to advance. He would scold him to 3. If Sal did not enter the arena, let him think that she had given up. A drop of sweat slid down Moran's face. He clarified that there was a countdown, namely 3 seconds. If Sal did not enter the arena, then it would be considered a refusal. The main character crossed his arms over his chest and replied that he was really in too much of a hurry. He spread his arms in different directions and warned Luna that they could start. Yes, she put her crossbow in front of her and exclaimed that he should take her blow. Mushrooms grew on the vine. A powerful stream of energy burst out of the dragon's mouth. The protagonist assured her that he would not let her repeat the old tricks. They would solve everything quickly, and also apologize for her rudeness. Luna fell to her knees and noticed that this technique was too cool. The commentator announced that Luna was falling outside the arena. Sal was winning. The Thunder Flame Dragon was too strong, and by the unanimous decision of the second prince of the Academy leadership, the use of contract magical beasts in the arena tournament was no longer allowed. The blonde guy leaned his forehead against the dragon's head and thought that the Academy always showed him special justice. He put his hand on his thigh. The guy in the witch's head explained that this guy on the other side had incredible protection. Even Gloria couldn't leave a scratch on him. She shouldn't think about showing mercy or restraint. He sat down and looked at them and warned the girl that if it became dangerous, she should surrender immediately. He would take care of the rest. A black-haired guy in a mask was holding on to the hilt of his sword with both hands. The main character was speculating about who this guy was. He had never heard of him in his previous life. 3 different elements formed in the 3 clouds. The light-haired girl threw up her hand and shouted for him to accept her attack, the young man in the hat remarking that it was incredible how she was able to use 3 high-level attack spells at the same time. Her attacks rushed at her opponent. He looked at her coolly and informed her that her attacks would have no effect on him. The protagonist didn't understand how a blow could just disappear into nowhere. If all that elemental magic energy was absorbed, then where did it go? He put 2 hands on the hilt of his sword and said that the balance of power would return her an equivalent response. Sal shouted that she should take care of herself. This guy was going to deliver a powerful blow. The girl hovered over the battlefield, wondering if it was wind magic, not only absorbing energy, but also using the power of the wind to accumulate power for the circuit. The main character caught the girl in his hands and added to himself that another victory in an instant. His strength surpasses all other participants. The commentator said that Andrea flies out of the arena. The victory goes to the Nameless Knight, and also that the final battle begins, Sal against the Nameless Knight, who will win the final victory. The prince sat idly on the throne. Moran added that the winner would become the new head of the Imperial Academy. Whether a commoner or an aristocrat, all students during their years of study would be subordinate only to him. The man with the scar on his forehead grinned slightly. Someone said that this loser Sal, who had been expelled from the family, would really lead their future. The Nameless Knight grabbed the hilt of his sword with his hand. Someone said that he was not even worthy of the light. He just needed to finish him off with one blow. He was just a pathetic loser. The protagonist looked at his opponent. The commentator announced that the tournament was starting right away. The opponents stood opposite each other, the blonde guy saying that he was the strongest opponent he had ever faced. But today the victory would be his. He would cut through his armored armor, his mask, and with him the prejudices of arrogant fools against those who were not called losers. The main character spread his hands in different directions. He replied that dogs like him always dreamed of turning the heavens upside down. Enough words, you need to fight. Sid swung his sword and clarified that it was it that absorbed Andrea's attack. It seemed that it was not a skill, but a weapon that accumulates power by devouring magic. He was slightly surprised that he was able to manifest it. The nameless knight placed 2 hands on the hilt of his sword. He exclaimed that they would test if he was really so invulnerable. He raised his sword in front of him and asked him not to waste his strength. He would not be able to break through his absolute defense. The protagonist was enveloped in wind magic. He added that balance would punish him for his audacity. The main character snapped his fingers. He clutched the hilt of his sword in his right hand and wondered if he thought he was the arbiter of fate. Looking down on everyone, the boiling blood in his veins would not allow his wind to curb him. Sal stomped his foot with all his strength. The information window said that blood melting, an area of molten lava created by blood energy, doubled the strength and speed of a blood swordsman. Blood bolts flew forward. He realized that if the others could not break through his defenses, then their blows were either not powerful enough or not frequent enough. They fell into the enemy's magical barrier. He held out his sword in front of him and expressed a desire to see how much more of his blood magic he could absorb. The nameless knight looked at him and didn't say that he was a mad fighter who deserved to be his opponent. He put his hand behind himself and invited him to fight fairly and openly. The main character looked at him and said that it was ridiculous, honest and open to fight. He had told him that arrogant aristocrats should not underestimate the bloody swordsmen who live in the shadows. His opponent swung his sword. He spread his hands to the sides in bewilderment. The guy looked at him and wondered if he had set a blood magic trap in advance while he was fighting off attacks. The blonde-haired youth rushed to attack him, saying that let him, an arrogant knight, show him his true face hidden under this mask. He grabbed his blade and noticed that he was the first to put a sword to his throat. Victory was not yet decided, so he should not rejoice too soon. Huge wings materialized behind him. Information windows said that angel wings, S-class weapons with multifunctional properties, for attack, defense and transformation, the treasures of the Imperial Auction House, the value of the entire city. Angel wings in the shape of a shield, envelop the body in the power of a super-strong hurricane, creating a stable absolute protection in space. The blonde guy slid a few meters back and wondered if these were angel wings. This guy wasn't that simple. He looked at him and clarified that this was his true strength. The system window reported that angel wings in the shape of wings were adhering to the body, enhancing the wearer's strength and speed, as well as accumulating the sword wind for a powerful blow. Sel rushed to the attack and declared that he would not give him a single chance to bring his breath. He instantly blocked his attack and replied that he would teach this arrogant boy respect. He swung his sword again. He looked at his opponent and invited him to attack. They were both enveloped in an aura. He noted that it was very cool, simply incredible. The man watched the fight and wondered, such weapons, such techniques, this is the guy he once taught why he was here. Their swords crossed in battle. Moran approached the prince, who said that he did not think that he would dare to come here. Those people they secretly trained would finally come in handy. Today this nameless knight would die. The black-haired guy also held a sword in front of him and said that his sword skill was no worse than his. He was getting stronger with every moment of the fight. Why was that? He soared above him and replied that he thought that he only needed blood magic as a trap to hold him back. The information window said that ultra-fast regeneration, blood melting, an area of space created by Sal's blood energy, was connected to him at any moment. Blood energy sensed all the movements in the arena and supplied him with power. The nameless knight spread his hands to the sides and realized, this is it, then he will simply destroy all of his blood energy at once. The information window said that the sacred storm sword was absorbing the sword wind from the powerful air currents, creating countless shadow blades for a massive attack on the area. The protagonist crossed his arms and reminded him not to dare to underestimate the power of the blood swordsman. A huge monster appeared behind his opponent, who exclaimed that it was very cool, light against shadow, who would be stronger. Sal was standing in the middle of the battlefield and asked that even now, he was still clinging to the last hope. He looked at his opponent and replied that it was time for him to cling to straws. He hovered over the arena. He looked at his opponent's attack and noted that it was treacherous. He dared to use the blood energy to tie him up and mock him. He held his arms crossed in front of him and stated that it was useless. The blood energy was alive, and the more he resisted, the more it squeezed him. He thought that he would check how many more trump cards he had up his sleeve. The nameless knight waved his skeleton arm. The system board reported that the necromancer's hand, the weapon of the first head of the Na clan, naturally suppressed any abilities of living beings. An S-class black magic weapon, a priceless treasure of the Imperial pawnshop. A bloody attack from Sal rained down on him. Then he notified that he had forced him to take out this weapon. The information window said that the withering of death dries up the life force of the target, turning it into a dead shell. His opponent calmly walked towards him and noticed that if he was to judge by sheer strength, he was superior to him in this battle. A drop of sweat slipped down the protagonist's cheek. He felt that something was clearly wrong. He tried to show him his favor. Why he felt even more dangerous. The hooded guy waved his whip. The protagonist grabbed him with his attack and thought, such a massive conspiracy in the Imperial Academy, the one behind it, and the person in front of him, both difficult individuals. The mask of the nameless knight fell to the floor. A drop of sweat slid down his cheek. The system board reported that it was Richard, the Crown Prince, the eldest prince of the royal family. Masked warriors jumped into the arena from the stands. The blond youth recalled that in his past life he had heard that the eldest prince was loved by the warriors. He always went ahead, suppressing the rebels. But alas, he died too early. Now he realized that most likely he was killed by endless assassination attempts by the aristocrats. Moran exclaimed that this was an assassination attempt. He needed to capture the assassins and protect the second prince first. Richard raised the necromancer's hand above him and noted that these were the unswerving hyenas again. If they smelled their prey, they would have a death grip. Body parts of the attacking warriors dissolved into thin air. The nameless knight held out his hand in front of him and stated that the pathetic who dared to confuse the assassination attempt on the royal family would accept death. The information window stated that the angelic wings in the form of a vault, connected to the treasury of the imperial pawnshop, allowed any weapon to be instantly exchanged based on reputation and returned at any time. A huge energy attack erupted from the dragon's mouth. Sal thought that if he could stop this assassination attempt and befriend the eldest prince, he would no longer have to fear harassment from the second prince. After being reborn, he didn't have a chance to make a real massacre. Today he would show them what the god of death from his past life was capable of. The main character put out his hand in front of him. Two different auras enveloped his body. He noted what the path of the Azura was. It was rivers of blood. The enraged protagonist opened his eyes and mouth wide. Richard's eyes and mouth were also wide open. Mysterious warriors held weapons in their hands. The nameless knight held out his arms in different directions and asked how the pathetic firefly dared to defy the glow of the full moon. The system board reported that the eternal stars, a staff inherited from the first head of the gun line, radiated magic that could erase the stars from the heavens. The demon dragon flew over the battlefield. The main character ordered them to see the fury of the thunderflame dragon. He held a blade in his right hand and noted that these pathetic attempts at murder were the work of a rabble, unworthy even of contempt. Richard raised his hand above him and added that they would pay with their lives for this vile rebellion. The information window read, "The sickle of the blood moon, the weapon of the first head of the Isaac family, which sweeps away everything in its path, ignoring any armor." An arrow flew in his direction. It hit him in the back. Blood clots flew in the air. Sal spread his arms to the sides and asked him to beware of the danger that lurked behind him. He clenched his left hand into a fist. He thanked him for his advice. It was time to end this once and for all. The attacking warrior burned in the blue flames. Above the arena sat a prince on a throne. He cut his hand with a knife and noted to himself that this day would be his last. The information window said, "Alchemy, sacrifice, a creature is born from a sea of blood and flesh, which makes heaven and earth tremble." Richard and Sal were standing next to each other. The first closed his face. The other noted that it was a potion that weakened the angel's wings. It seemed that the puppeteer in the shadows knew everything about it. The nameless knight clutched his face and exclaimed that his strength was failing. The protagonist in his right hand clutched the handle of the ball and asked not to appear here today. The eldest prince might have repeated his fate from his previous life, death by the blade of an assassin. The system's scoreboard reported, ultra-fast regeneration, flesh like a hydra is reborn, immune to any poison, the thunderous flame of karma, the indomitable and pure fiery thunder that sweeps away poisonous spells and mists. An energy attack erupted from the demonic dragon's mouth. A huge monster opened its mouth. The information window read, "A sandworm, a mysterious creature with a shell that does not lend itself to magic, devouring living flesh." The protagonist looked at him and noted to himself, "The shell of the sandworm is invulnerable to magic, and the eldest prince is poisoned and weak. They should not let him near even a step." The dragons rushed at him to attack. He sank the claws of his paw. He realized that the sandworm's shell was not given to magical blows. It was necessary to break through his defenses and pour magic directly into his gut. The system scoreboard reported, "A dragon stomp, a blow that absorbed the full weight of dragon power, the pinnacle of his physical rage." A magical attack burst into the monster's mouth. The information window read, "Dragon breath, an instant explosion in which all the dragon's magic is concentrated, its unsurpassed magic strike." Sal waved his hand under the dragon. Princip jumped up from his throne and wondered if he had dared to openly raise his hand against royal blood. Richard walked with him and replied that no, he was saving his life. But he, the dear younger brother, being the head of this tournament, had allowed a horde of murderers to fall upon them. He looked at them and told them that it was so. This attempt was deadly. Even he, under tight guard, narrowly escaped the fate. He assured him, let him be calm, he would get to the bottom of the truth and not leave the puppeteers alive in the shadows. The nameless knight sat on the throne and said that it was only thanks to Sal that they survived this day. The imperial law says that the savior of royal blood is allowed to be immediately elevated to the nobility. He glanced at his brother and added that he conferred on him the title of Viscount, and entrusted him with the duty of assisting the second prince in uncovering those who had woven this web of conspiracy. Someone's foot landed on the worm's body, and the worm thought that the bond between the sandworm and Sandra, who knew alchemy, could not help but be alarming. The protagonist bowed and declared his gratitude to the eldest prince for this honor, and also, As the winner of the rookie competition, he expected the second prince to fulfill his oath. He knitted his brows and wondered what he wanted, what he could give him, and thought, damn, he wanted to lure the winner of this award to become his dog, but Richard intercepted Sal first. He looked at him and demanded the Cooper family's silver Misty Marsh as the lands of his Viscony. A gray-haired man stood not far from them and noted that he was a greedy and dishonest jackal. The information window said, the size of the land, it is the embodiment of power and status, the cornerstone of any kind. Richard sat on the throne and stated that he believed that Sal was worthy of a reward, if the second prince would dare to back down on his promises. The matter with these possessions was not an easy one. He looked at the victor and added that if the silver Misty Marsh could not be given to Sal, then he offered to give him the ink ridge on the outskirts of the capital. A vein swelled on the second prince's forehead. He said that everyone knew that there were deposits of black gold in those lands. He had gnawed this promise out of the king with great difficulty, and thought that control over these veins of black gold was power over half of the magical wealth of the empire. He would never cede them to an outsider. The man was holding a crystal in his hands. The system displays reported black gold, this substance with incredible magical compatibility, an indispensable component for the creation of high-end magical artifacts, and therefore its value knows no bounds. Black gold, this is graphite, a piece of black gold that is fragile like glass, and cannot be restored, a real disposable treasure of luxury. And yet the aristocrats are ready to fight to madness. After all, it is a symbol of status and greatness. The aristocrat put 2 fingers to his forehead. Richard held out his hand to his brother, and asked if his dear younger brother had decided to give Sal the silver Misty Marsh, or the Incubus Ridge. He closed his eyes and announced that on behalf of the head of the Cooper family, he was handing over the silver Misty Swamps to Sal. The gray-haired man folded his arms over his chest and exclaimed, he dared to grab a piece of cake from the Cooper family, and stuff his belly with it. The protagonist's hair fluttered in the wind. He recalled that in his previous life, being the greatest shadow, he received the silver Misty Marsh as a gift from the Cooper family. Later, a new mineral, mithril, was found in the marshes. As a source of material that is more valuable than black gold, the silver Misty Marsh once again returned under the full control of the Cooper family. A flag hung on the pin. The protagonist stood in front of his enemy, who declared that every inch of the Cooper's land was washed in blood. If he did not hold out against them for a quarter of an hour without falling, then they would never give up a traitor like him to a Marsh, who objected that these swamps would be his. By all means, they belonged to him by right, and always had been. The man swung his sword and said that before throwing out loud words, he needed to weigh his strength. The information window reported, the wrath of the great range, the strength of the mountain giants poured into the blade, and the blow fell with the power of an entire mountain range. Sid held out his sword in front of him and swore with his soul, everything he said, he would certainly fulfill. The system scoreboard reported, the will of the blood flames, burns all the blood in the body, breaks the limits of the flesh to erect an indestructible defense. He looked at his enemy carefully. Leon's mouth opened slightly in surprise. He smirked and wondered what he thought. The blood magic that was devouring his life would stop him. A terrifying ghost stood behind him, who added that without the relic of the first blood swordsman, no blood swordsman would survive 10 years. Richard raised his hand in front of him and spoke, the relic of the first blood swordsman that the head of the Coopers was talking about, it must be it. The information window reported, the shackles of the demon blade, the scabbard of the first blood swordsman, capable of taming the backlash of the spirit of the blood sword. He approached the participants of the duel and said that a quarter of an hour had elapsed. It was time for the head of the Coopers to prepare the transfer of the silver Misty Swamps to Sal. The treasures were worthy of heroes. These scabbards were a gift to him. He thanked him for saving his life, and for allowing him to enjoy such an amazing fight. The guy grabbed the relic and thanked him. He looked at him and exclaimed that in a month's time, a banner with his name would fly over the silver mists of the swamps. 2 men were walking down a long corridor. One said that the academy was investigating the assassin's accomplices, so it was forbidden to enter and exit the Imperial Academy. If he wanted to find a suitable place to train, then he could only come here. He wondered how to get to the advanced training rooms here. Why everyone was busy. The young man grabbed the girl by the hair and noted that she looked like an accomplice of those murderers. Let her take off her clothes, and they would check. He replied that the training rooms were seized by students from the Alliance of Aristocrats. These conceited people with high-sounding titles do whatever they want in the academy. A guy flew out of the room. Sal turned to look at them, who was shouting that let them wait. He would bring the men and tear them to shreds. The huge man waved his hand and asked who it was next to Oliver, who replied that it was Sal. They needed to occupy their room for advanced training for a while. The boy pointed his finger at him and clarified that he was the one who had won the rookie competition, and had also put a great second prince. He was handsome, so let him take a training room and use as much as he wanted. They entered the room. The protagonist spread his hands in different directions and asked to cut him. Oliver did not understand what was wrong with him. The man sliced open Sal's body with his sword, who revealed that his body was indeed half consumed by the blood demon, the only way to escape from his power, to completely renew the blood. He held out his hands in front of him and added that he had Hydra abilities to regenerate quickly. By constantly losing and regenerating blood, he could gradually expel the demon's influence from his body. Blood gushed out of his body. He asked why he had chosen him to help. Wouldn't Chris be a better fit? He closed his eyes and replied that without the threat from Chris, the blood demon would have a chance to take over him completely. He raised the relic above him and remarked, it was a pity that this cowardly blood demon was so afraid of the scabbard that he did not dare to stick his head out. The demon spread his hands in different directions and clarified who said that he was afraid. Sal was digging his own grave. He attacked him and added that he thought this scabbard could curb him. It was just the ravings of a gray mare. The main character gritted his teeth and said that the scabbard is true, chains that restrain the chaos of blood magic. But the one who uses them needs a lot of strength. He opened his shirt and noticed that he needed the scabbard only to keep his mind clear, and he wanted to tame it with his own hands. The main character attacked the demon. The guy opened the door with his foot and shouted where was the bastard who kicked him. Let him get out. The young master returned for revenge. A group of aristocrats were standing in the doorway, one of them saying that this weakling, the same Sal who had angered the second prince, should be grabbed and the reward would be theirs. He rushed at them to attack and exclaimed how timely they came. They were an excellent bait for his bloody power.